Okay, welcome. Morgan County Commission work session. Today is December 19th, 2023. We'll begin with a 30-minute work session regarding the range and peaks, PIDs, and then we'll move to our regular meeting at 5 o'clock. Commissioner Wilson was at an appointment and is going to be a little bit late, so we'll excuse him until he arrives. All right, with that, are you up?
Okay, I'll be quick and short here, and then I'll turn over the bulk of the time to the developer team as well. We do have some people I'll introduce here in a second, but we're actually just going to be talking about the range PID. So this is for the letter of intent that was submitted. We think this is a good process to kind of get it before the county council, high-level highlights on what they're requesting, but more importantly, the reason why they're requesting the mill levy to help to build this property, to build these homes, and so on and so forth. So we've had an initial meeting with Janet. I've called her the wrong name so many times. I need to apologize on the record. With Janet, and so she went over the highlights with her. You know, some of her concerns were, well, I'd really like the development team there to explain the need for the request of the 6 mills. You know, how is this going to help the property? Why is it needed? You know, what's the hardship that they're kind of overcoming here? And so that'll be addressed by the development team and and by Ben, part of the financing team. But one thing I did just want to point out here is, you know, what as we've looked at this and tried to see, you know, what are some of the true benefits to the county of this. I mean, it would add additional supply and housing there. These will be high-end homes, usually probably in that $1 million+ range there. So it's not going to be affordable homes, but it is going to add additional supply. But one thing actually, as I've discussed with their development team, that this does help with, and many of you may know, the Mountain Green Sewer Improvement District is currently building a new facility and for anticipation of potential growth, and that's kind of, you know, all over the place with rates and everything else. You know, with this development as it is, you know, the PID really helps them, enables them to actually do this development. As I've talked to the developer, it seems like without the PID, these homes may not get built, or most likely won't. I'll let them address that in more detail. But more importantly, it wouldn't, you know, bring in that potential supply to the sewer district as well, as that they're, I think, counting on. But that's just one thing as we've talked about. But I'm gonna leave the bulk of the time for their team to introduce themselves and to really go over the need on why they're requesting that 6 mills and kind of the hardship with the property they're developing. So
Can you really quickly remind me the range and the peaks? I'm getting the locations confused. The range is a project on Trappers Loop, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So that's the I believe 36 acres. It's anticipated to zone for 43 residential homes.
Next to Trappers Point.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Whereas the Peaks one was the townhome development.
Down
I
next to
believe.
the church building.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, so the range is the one, the Warner property. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so this is going to be single-family residential homes, whereas the Peaks, which we're not talking about tonight, we've gotten the feedback from that, so we're going to be coming back to the council at a later date with updated documents based off that feedback for you to review, hopefully approve at that time. That's dealing with the townhomes. So, but I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ben. He's from D.A. Davidson. He's an underwriter for the financing team, so he can give us a little bit more information on the needs as far as the range kid is
Excellent.
concerned.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate the introduction. Grateful to be here before the commission this evening. So my name is Ben Wilhelm. I am with D.A. Davidson. We're a municipal bond underwriter, and we're here with CW Group, representing the range PID application, for which there has been a petition and an LOI submitted for consideration of the commission. The range, as Marcus mentioned, is about 35 acres, located just east and adjacent to Trappers Loop Road, north of the Mountain Green Cemetery and Mountain Green Middle School. And they are seeking PID to help to finance some of the costs of the public improvements. So I guess to taking a pause. The objectives today are really just to address the questions that the commission has with regards to the PID for the range, and then specifically to get a positive indication to proceed to draft a governing document, which would be presented to the commission and discussed in a future meeting. So with that, happy to take any questions that you guys have.
I'm blanking on the names of the two different types of PID, I guess financing options here. Can you maybe go over those and then which type they're looking at here?
Yeah, so I believe you're thinking the assessment bond versus the property tax bond.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so for the range, they are seeking a property tax for the PID to bond against up to 6 mils. And I mean, really, there's some fundamental differences, but first and foremost, just as a recap, a PID fundamentally is a financing tool that allows for access to tax-exempt capital markets to help to pay for public improvements. Ultimately, the mill levy is borne by the property owners and is basically outstanding until the debt is defeased, and then the PID goes away and the mill levy goes away.
What's the timeline, excuse me, on this particular project?
Yeah, so they're expecting a 4 to 5 year build out. I can speak a little bit more to the project itself. And the bonds would be a 30-year maturity in the event they issue.
Next year is only 2 weeks away. Is it 2025 or 2024?
I think their plan is to start
Okay.
Can you tell me, do the individual residents, they have the option, or would this be set up where it's kind of a set thing, they wouldn't have an option to pay
So
a full
the
amount?
mill levy is outstanding until the bonds are paid off in their entirety, and the property tax is based on the assessed value of the property.
I understand all that. I thought we had discussions where there was a possibility.
That's if they
So
do the
under the assessment
version.
bond structure, there's the
That's why.
option to prepay the assessment lien that's on the property.
Okay, so we're not doing that option. You're not asking
Yeah.
that option.
And just to talk about some of the differences here a little bit. So under the property tax structure, there's no so the two structures are the property taxes and the assessment bonds. Under the assessment bond structure, you have a lien placed on the property, and there's bondholder recourse to the underlying land. One of the advantages of a property tax bond is that there's no recourse, bondholder recourse to the underlying property. And so, as opposed to an assessment, which would, in the event of delinquency on the annual assessment payment that's due, there could be foreclosure on the property. Under the property tax, the only obligation is for the property owner to pay their property taxes, as is the case always. And if they're delinquent for 5 years, then the county treasurer can foreclose on the property.
So is there any mechanism then to force payment besides the county?
No.
Okay. So there's no guarantee to the bondholder in that case?
That's right.
Maybe I can address one difference too on why this one's asking for the mill levy compared to the special assessment is usually dealing with the phasing of the project too. With special assessment, typically these are going to be quicker projects, so the lien's put on there, quickly build out, with the townhomes, they can put those up, get them sold, get the assessment offer, give them the option to pay off the assessment. With this one kind of be more of a longer phase project over the next 3-4 years. It really is more conducive to do the property tax, where it has kind of a longer timeline, the 30 years versus a 20-year max on the assessment type bond, and a few other different things that makes it a little bit more advantageous for both the investor on the bond buying side, so somebody that's going to buy this bond, as well as the developer that's seeking the product too. The assessments one's just because of the shorter maturity nature, the 20 years versus the 30, and a few other different things. It just doesn't fit as cleanly with this type project with the longer phase out. And it's a smaller thing. I want to put this in perspective too. They're not coming here asking for $50 million or whatever that number is. This is going to be a bond that's issued that's less than $2 million. So it's a very small bond as far as the property total size of what they're actually going to be able to raise on this. And I don't know if Ben or the developer wants to talk more on why they're doing that. From what I understand, it's because the land is a little bit tough to develop, kind of saying that lightly. And so without it, they think that potentially the land could possibly not get developed. And at least for them, they wouldn't be interested in pursuing the development on their side. But I don't know if there'd be more to that.
So before you answer that, why would you want to do this versus, I mean, I don't understand the reasoning. If you've got enough money to put in the development, why wouldn't you want to put in all the infrastructure too that goes with it? I mean, it just seems to me like if you run a development, you should have the money before you begin a development.
Yeah, I don't know if the development, you want to speak to the project itself?
Chase Freebairn representing CW Land. Vice Chair Fackrell, it's a great question. I mean, as you know, land development is very capital intensive. It's a huge amount of funding that's needed to get projects off the ground, and this isn't a little 5-acre townhome deal in Clearfield or something. I mean, this is a larger, even though there's only 43 lots, it's spread across 35 acres, and it's really a site with a substantial amount of topography. There's some wetlands on the property which we're avoiding within the bounds of the Army Corps permitting process. We've worked through wetland delineation with the Army Corps. That's complete. We'll work through our permit. Another aspect of it is UDOT actually has certain requirements for us to widen Trappers Loop west of the property, westward onto the property, and because there's wetland on the UDOT property as well, we have to do a permit on the wetland property. We have to do vertiblock structural walls to keep Trappers Loop where it's supposed to be. So it's, that's in addition to a project that just, honestly, there's just a lot of infrastructure. The rock retaining walls, dollars just with the cuts and fill. There's more to it than meets the eye. Driving by on your way up Trappers Loop, it doesn't seem like much. It just seems like you'd do what Trappers Point did and just plug right in. But I can speak, having walked the properties, there's a lot more topo than meets the eye, and it's just very capital intensive to build on slope, to build next to a highway that needs to be widened, and it's not something you can just quickly write a check for. But I think to Marcus's point and Ben's point is, this is in a way development paying for itself. I mean, ultimately, a portion of those costs are put against the property on this property tax, and it's digestible over 30 years versus coming due up front. Or so we feel it's the best way forward for this project. I wish we didn't have a lot of these constraints. I think PIDs can be powerful tools, especially in more rural areas like this. Like I said, if this was the Wasatch Front and it's just your average, 10-acre project, it's probably not needed. But, $1 million in rock wall, $1 million in water, I mean, it adds up. And our average lot cost right now, without a PID, we're about over $216,000 to improve one single lot on this site.
How much are you asking for each lot?
It's projected. That's without the PID. So if we got the PID, obviously that would come down slightly, but we're projecting in the low 400s for retail lot sales.
And
starting.
that's a half-acre lots,
Yeah, 20,000 square feet minimum.
so that's a quarter or a third.
So half acres minimum, and then they would scale up. There's a couple that are an acre, 2 acres, but not all of that ground is usable.
I just add, ultimately, the cost of infrastructure is always borne by the end user. The PID allows for access to pay for that infrastructure at tax exempt rates. And so that's part of the reason you're financing that infrastructure over the course of 30 years at tax exempt rates, as opposed to rolling that into your mortgage.
There's only one thing I don't like on it at this moment is, I mean, I can see it, but if I can pay off my house in 15 years, yet now I'm going to have to now pay an additional amount, still not paying off my house for the next 15. I mean, we normally have our regular property taxes, but I just do not see or understand why it cannot be a bond that you're going to recoup and pay off before the project's finished.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're selling homes at that kind of a price, why not pay it off and put that into the sales price of the homes for the consumer? Because they're not going to get in. They're not going to really think about buying the home. And now all of a sudden I've got a 6 mil levy, if they even know what that is, price tag onto their property taxes different than I have to pay.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to, I mean, I love the fact that we can do a bonding, or I mean, you can, as a construction, you can do a PID. I love that idea. But I'm worried about the consumer.
Yep. Yeah, so we'd mentioned the lower risk to the homeowners from a bonding standpoint of the property tax, where there's no recourse to the underlying property from the bondholders. Additionally, I'll just add that homeowners ultimately assume control of the district once it's built out. That's usually built into the governing document. And so there'll be a homeowner board, and they will ultimately control their own destiny. And it's possible, and usually is the case, that the bonds refinance, and those property owners can, due to the refinanced lower interest rate on a rated deal, as opposed to non-rated deal, they can lower their mill levy. And so it's not as though, you know, they ultimately just have to automatically pay 6 mils additional cost on their property taxes for 30 years. You know, they have control ultimately of the district board and can lower their mill levy.
Can they pay it off? If the homeowners association, could they pay it off early?
The mill levy remains outstanding until all the debt is repaid. So in the event that the property appreciates more in value, then the bonds could pay off early, but ultimately the full amount of the debt outstanding from the PID has to be paid off before the property tax goes away.
So I think one of the reasons that that you even have to come to the county and talk about doing a PID and get approval is because at the end of the day, the county's going to collect that money and remit it back to pay the bond off, right? Because it's going to be on the property tax bill. And I think adding to what Commissioner Fackrell said, whether residents realize it or not, or where the money's going, at the top of that tax bill it says Morgan County. And so we do assume a certain amount of, I don't know if it's risk, but we assume a certain amount of responsibility here, even if it's not a financial or direct financial responsibility. My concern is, I think for a county to do that, or a municipality to agree to that, there ought to be some type of benefit to the community. And when you say, well, we're talking about $1 million homes, well, clearly it's not going to be a benefit in the terms of affordable housing, or we know there's not a commercial aspect. So to be blunt, when I see this as a drain on the county, not a benefit to the county. Now, for some, they might say, well, there is a benefit because we need more housing. And I guess that's true. I don't know if we need more $1 million housing, maybe. But I guess what I'm getting at is I feel like there needs to be some benefit to the county if the county's going to take on that responsibility. And I think, ultimately, I prefer the assessment bond structure way better than this structure because it allows the lot owner or the developer to take some of that cost and deal with it up front rather than spreading it out over 30 years. And honestly, I'm not worried about the people who buy initially because I feel like you as a developer are going to be very clear with them from the beginning. There is this added cost, etc. It's the next guy and the guy after that that buys in that subdivision thinking they're getting a good deal and then realizing there's an extra $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 on their tax bill every year for the next 30 years. So I think I'm not totally opposed to this. I just think that there's pieces that we need to really consider here and not just simply, I get that it's a finance tool. There seems to be a little bit of a thought that the county needs this and wants this development. I don't know if that's really the case. If you came to us and said, we're going to put in some commercial and that's going to add to your tax base, great. I'd be much more on board. But just saying, hey, we're going to build another $43 million homes, that's not a benefit in my perspective. That's just more kids for the schools. It's more roads for us to plow. It's more responsibility for Morgan County and a drain on our system, at least from my perspective. So maybe there's some benefit that I'm not seeing. You can explain to us a little more.
Can I comment before you comment, Marcus? I appreciate Chair's assessment on this, and these are interesting. They're new. There's not been a lot of PIDs that's been brought before the county. I definitely think it's a mechanism to help properties develop easier, smoother, where you're spreading out these dollars more instead of just the developer taking on all the dollars up front. I know our earlier thought process was let's make sure the people that are buying the lots know. I mean, they just got to know ahead of time. I'm worried about resale of the lots and how the people that are going to buy these lots 5 years down the road, do they know what they're buying into? I agree from a perspective of that. Say that I'm against having new residents come to the county. Absolutely not. I mean, I think that's great. And since I've lived here, I've met a lot of great people that have moved in after. So I'm not against that. I think it would help to our it would help for a few things. But I guess the concern I have is if we've allowed PIDs in the past, a couple of them, 3 of them, 2, 3. I guess the thought process I have is we probably either ought to say as a whole, we want to continue to move forward with PIDs or not. Because it's really, for me, it is a mechanism for the developer to help fund things. So I think
the key difference between this and any other PID that we've done is that the other ones have had some type of a commercial component that adds to the tax base, and I don't see that in this particular one. And maybe I'm off on that, but thinking about the other ones, there is a commercial component to them that provides to the tax base.
eventually.
And I mean, there's another thing to go along with that same thought is, I mean, if this is a project that the developer wants to do, they want to do this project, but yet they want to sock it. I mean, normally you'd sock it to them up front, paying for the house. Yeah, I don't see, I mean, you're going to get it to where the homes are lower priced, so that way they can get into them, not low price, lower price. The development of all the infrastructure is going to be not even being paid for by you, I mean, whoever, by the developer. It's not being paid for by them. You're taking out a bond or a financing tool for these people that are paying for the home to pay for it at a lower price, but then to, I don't know, it's just shifting the burden of who is the developer of this property and who is eventually going to be paying for this developer developing all this property and then making all the money, walking away from it. And now this homeowner not just pays for the house, but they pay for all the public streets and everything else. They're going to say, why doesn't the county just go and put in the infrastructure, which I'm sure you're going to say, why doesn't the county just put in the infrastructure and we pay for it as a whole county, which I don't know if it's fair to the whole county either. And so there's a lot of ifs in it. I mean, that's why I prefer something that's going to be paid off in a shorter amount of time, that is not going to be taxed on the burden of the people. Because if all of a sudden we drop down if it happens, the property taxes go down, you still have this bond and theirs is going to go up. That's not fair. And so those are just from my perspective. So that's just my opinion. Hey, who
So-
am I?
If the appropriate disclosures are made, which they're required to be made under law, and we could certainly require additional disclosures, if the markets function efficiently, which is a bit of an assumption, but I generally trust markets generally better than people trying to guess and estimate markets, then the additional cost is actually being spread out over the life of the infrastructure, and it can actually be a fairer mechanism with respect to the respective owners of a home over that 30-year period. Now, I don't want anyone to be surprised by the fact that they have an additional mill. But if they go into that with their eyes open and fully aware that they're paying a reduced cost on the basis of the mill, paying out over 30 years of time, it can actually be more efficient and more fair. With respect to your comment about the county putting in the infrastructure, we never put in project improvements. That's always going to be their responsibility. This is simply just deciding whether or not we're going to permit them to utilize a financing mechanism that the state has now adopted based upon decades of experience in other jurisdictions, particularly Colorado. And it's been an efficient mechanism for them. I don't see the hue and cry coming from those communities that have utilized them. It's just a part of the overall package that they buy into. So I'm generally supportive. I think either approach has upsides and downsides to it. But I think, again, if you assume a proper disclosure and relatively well-functioning markets, it should take care of itself.
So why would you not, I'm just going off of what you're saying here, why would you not have, if you're going to get a PID, get it to where as you're building the home, or when you built the home, you just add that into the cost of the home? I mean,
Talking about the assessment option potentially, I guess,
Right.
would be done.
I mean-
We're running into our other meeting time, so I want to give you just a couple of seconds to maybe respond to some of those comments, and then
Can I just summarize?
We'll
So
discuss
we
a little
wanna come
more.
back.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's the goal. We don't want to take any more time today. And so just to make sure I understand, we need to come back, show the value. I think that's what you want to see, whether that's helping the improvement district, how that's going to affect the county, show some of the numbers on that. Happy to provide that. And then
Okay.
disclosures, I think Commissioner McConnell hit down the head. There's additional disclosures we can put into the bylaws of the HOA, kind of enhance it, make sure that people are held harmless, or at least get abundances of notice if they're going to be moving into that property. So let us take all that feedback. We'll put all that to the paperwork and come back and try to get back in front of you in January and go from there.
love it. Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate
Sounds
it.
great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, we just wrapped up a work session. We will begin. County Commission meeting today is December 19th, 2023, and all members of the commission are present. We're going to begin with an invocation and pledge of allegiance, and I'll go ahead and offer that. Our Father in heaven, we're so very grateful to live in this community. We're grateful for Morgan. We are grateful for the people who live here, and we ask thee to please continue to bless this valley and all those who live and work here. We're grateful for those who work within the county government and work hard to provide good services to our residents, and ask thee to please bless them. Bless us as we discuss the issues and needs of the county, that we will be inspired to do good. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a pretty full agenda this evening, so we're going to try to move as quickly as we can through these items. We'll start with our consent items. That is section B. If you're following along on the agenda, I think there's some copies in the back of the room. You can also find it online. We'll begin with consent item number 1. Garrett Smith, ratification of an increase in the county attorney's budget to cover the increased cost of legal research and an additional user on the account for our new deputy attorney.
All right, thank you. So this is a Lexis agreement, and it's a software that we use for legal research, just to ensure that the county is relying on current and comprehensive case law in our filings. And during the budget hearings this year, the commission did grant a request for an increase in budget, because I knew that the prior contract with Lexis was expiring, and I also knew I would have I would need an additional user account for my deputy attorney. And so the increase to my budget covers the increased monthly cost. This agreement locks in the monthly price for 3 years and increases it $14 a month for the second year and another $14 a month for the third year. And I had previously circulated this agreement by email. I received approval from a majority of the commission, and I'm just looking for ratification.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the Lexis subscription agreement for state and local government, account number 1000088B0, previously executed by you on December 8th.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Moving to consent item number 2, again, Garrett Smith, ratification use of ARPA funds for the CJC.
All right, so this is an item that's come up to the commission at least 2 or 3 times prior to tonight, and the initial amount was approved over a year ago. It's been a long time ago. At the last meeting, there were 2 comments that were made. Commissioner Fackrell pointed out that it was Scott Jenkins instead of Gage Frower who was listed on the agreement, so that has been updated. And then the other comment was from Commissioner McConnell with regard to whether we add an additional provision that would say if the conditions listed in Section 3 paragraph or Section 1 paragraph 3 were not met by a certain date, that those funds deposited with the Weber County Treasurer would be returned to Morgan County. As I've been working with Chris Crockett at the Weber County Attorney's Office, kind of going back and forth on how we wanted to handle the change to the agreement, he just informed me that all 3 of those conditions have now been met. And so I'm just bringing it back with the updated chair and requesting a ratification, but just the form of the agreement.
Any questions? Okay, we'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the interlocal cooperation agreement for the distribution of coronavirus state and local recovery funds for the construction of a new Children's Justice Center as presented.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And then our last consent item is the minutes from the December 5th, 2023 meeting. Are there any adjustments that have not yet been provided to Julie?
One request I would have, and I haven't asked Julie to do this, but in the future, can you give a little bit more elaboration on some of the items, just in case we have a question at a later date that needs to happen. That's my only thought.
The item C, declarations of conflict of interest. I know I made that statement. We ought to make it my name there. So, okay. And then under G, the budget hearing, I think there's some extra numbers in there.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount, I'm not very good at math, but I think that's $14 billion.
Yeah, you're right. Should have been 14 million and change. So we've got it on the budget itself that was adopted. We can, if you just want to get with Leslie, you can get that number.
Yeah, so let's just correct that. I mean, we're shooting for the stars there, maybe.
It'd be great if we had a $14 billion budget, wouldn't it? Okay. Any other adjustments to the minutes? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the December 5th, 2023 minutes.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. On to item C, declarations of conflict of interest with any commissioners for any items on tonight's agenda. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to the public comment section. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission. We will ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please come forward, state your name and for the record, and then make your comments. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ed Schultz with Wasatch Peaks Ranch. I'm here to talk about the decision that was made in this building December 6th. I'm sure you've all heard about it. And just wanted to share some information. That decision was impactful for WPR. But it also was impactful for the citizens of Morgan County. And it was impactful for the taxpayers of Morgan County, and it was impactful for the school children of Morgan County. And despite these efforts of what we think is a small group of individuals, we feel very supported by this community. We feel that the county will ultimately prevail in this litigation against the county. And I'm here to address some of the misinformation that has been circulating out there, and also to share our perspective, along with ask a few questions. And I know you can't respond, these are rhetorical questions, but I think it's important for all of you to think about these, as well as everyone here in the audience. Taxes, right? A big part of the appeal to WPR back in 2018 and 2019 when we worked on this was for the potential for significant tax revenue to be generated by WPR, paid to the county and the school district. Well, so in 2022, paid in November of this year, our residents paid we created $172 million of real estate, and they paid $2.2 million of taxes to Morgan County. Now, we all know, and Chairman Newton's explained this very eloquently, a big portion, close to 2/3, goes to the school district. But those are significant dollars. Since 2022, in 2023, here in this room, first with staff, then with the Planning Commission, and then with County Commission, all of you, we created another 55 home sites. What were those going to generate as far as revenue for taxes? Chairman Newton, you mentioned 2 weeks ago that the county has $2.2 billion of real estate that is assessed for taxes to generate the revenue that is required to run the county, to run the school district. $172 million is about 7.8%. You double that for 2023, where does that go? You go back to our original economic impact analysis from 2018 and 2019, that at that time, total assessed value in the county was about 1.7 billion. For 500 home sites at WPR, we were talking about generating $3.2 billion of real estate that would be assessed and paid for, and help pay for county services to the entire community, to pay for schools for the kids in the Morgan County School District. Significant. The other thing I'd like to talk about is jobs. Right now, we employ 190 individuals directly for WPR. 40 of those are Morgan residents. A number of them are here in the audience tonight. What happens if there is an attempt to stop our operations? There's been discussions of that online. There's been discussions of that behind the scenes. I'm actually, frankly, very, very concerned about that. We now are one of the major employers here in Morgan County. On top of that, there's the indirect employment. We have hundreds of people working for us, and all of them have been terminated. We can still do protective maintenance, but those contractors and those subcontractors, I can't speak that they've been terminated, excuse me, but they have been impacted. Some of them will be terminated here before Christmas. It's a hard time to get new large municipal work. Tens of millions of dollars of contracts are open with companies like Whitaker, other major companies throughout the northern Wasatch, and it takes a while to replace those and to ramp those employees back up. I've brought half a dozen impact letters along with some select quotes from our contractors that I'd like to share with each one of you tonight for you to think about what those impacts are, because these impacts, the positive and the negatives, now extend past Morgan County. Those contractors are located in Davis County, Weber County, Summit County, Salt Lake County, and a lot of them, and especially the smaller ones, have bet their future and their dreams on this project. So the impact is significant. And one last note, our residents at WPR care about these communities. They care about Morgan County, and they care about these contractors. We're in the process of starting a 501(c) at the behest of our members to take care of these contractors and these subcontractors before Christmas because of the lump of coal they received. And I'd like to think that that's telling of the people we are bringing to the community, that they care about people they don't know. So thank you for listening to this evening, and I'll share these with Garrett if that's all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Are we supposed to state our name too?
If you will.
Okay, for the record, Adam Toon. First off, I wish to thank you guys for your service. It's a thankless job, and I appreciate you giving the opportunity for us to address you. I have just 3 items I wanted to bring forward. First off, and I do admit I got caught with sitting on my laurels, but the geotech hazard ordinance that you have is pretty much a mirror image of what I remember reading back when I was on the Planning Commission 2008, 2009. Even then, when we had hearings on it, it was explained that it was too much of a broad brush. It's an onerous thing, and now as I'm working with the client, for just a 500 square foot addition, it's adding over $20,000 into the project, which is almost, it's nearly 10-15% of the project. I wish we could look at it with not somewhat broad of a brush, perhaps through your area plans and such, of finding a way so it's not such a hard process just to put an addition to an existing house that's been there for a couple decades. Secondly, as we go through the permit process of things, you may find that when you have to fill out 8 different forms, you're putting the same information on the top of every single form. I believe we have technology sufficient now that could be populated so that it doesn't have to be filled out. I mean, I understand it's going to different departments in that, but I do believe that we could make a lot easier for a user, or more user friendly, just by making it so it auto populates your address, your name, the contractor, the lot number, the parcel number, the description, the township and range, and that it would save a whole lot of time for everybody, and then you wouldn't have to try to read my handwriting or hope that I could type the same thing twice. Lastly, I would just like to show my appreciation or express appreciation for the support which you guys have given regarding the PDCF fund, and would appreciate if that continues. It helps us out in the livestock industry. It helps us out quite a bit. It also helps out for hunting and the deer populations. So if you could continue that, it would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Phillips. I've just got 3 items for you guys as well. The first being that I want to thank all of you guys, seriously from the bottom of my heart, for the work that you do. I see comments that bash your character and are disparaging, and it breaks my heart because I recognize the amount of time that you guys donate to this county for the county's benefit. Chairman Newton, I had a conversation with you recently where I wasn't aware that you spent your own money to drive up to the Yellowstone Club to go and see what that was all about so that you could make an informed decision for our county. I really, really appreciate that you cared that much about our county to spend your own time and your own money, and I know you weren't the only one, to try and make a really informed decision. And I want you guys all to know there are many of us in the community that do recognize what you give. Thank you for sitting in those seats. The second thing I want to talk about is I'm really concerned about this referendum process. I see this as such a dangerous place where we're letting a tyranny of a minority strip us of our Fifth Amendment rights. This is dangerous territory. We're messing with our U.S. constitutional rights over what is a popularity contest. And I've seen this play out, not just with Wasatch Peaks. There was an application that came in from Matt Slate and Clay Rich for a development on Line Creek Road. And I got calls, and the things that were brought up is we don't trust one of those people. We don't trust that he's just going to stick to what they're saying. So once it got approved, because it did meet what that area is, 5-acre lots are exactly what that area plan talks about. But because people didn't like that man, they filed a referendum. That's tyranny. That is not okay, and it's scary. And I'm worried that this is going to interrupt a lot more people. And hopefully none of these people that are doing this wind up on the other side of that tyranny. Lastly, I just want to say that I wholeheartedly support Wasatch Peaks. I commend them for how they've handled themselves. I'm so grateful that they chose this place and all of what they've done for this community, whether that's supporting junior livestock, the sports teams, all that they've given back, and especially for the tongue lashing they've gotten for doing a lot of good, in my opinion. Anyway, that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Ronnie Whittier. I live down in Peterson, Utah. And if you get off exit 96 and head down to Heinz Country Store, there's not a lot of building going on there per se. There's one house, the Lions House, on the right as you go down to the stop sign. And then from there, and I'm referring this because there's been a lot of truck movement and dump trucks and things traveling that road. But from the time they hit that stop sign, you've got Heinz Country Store, which is owned by my son, Cody Whittier, and ran by my sister, DeLynn, and her husband, Gary Patterson. Then as you drive a little bit south, you'll see it was the Fred Kemp home that is now owned by DeLynn and Gary Patterson. Then we have the storage units. Then you immediately turn right to go to Wasatch Peaks. So Wasatch Peaks basically impacts the hardest Heinz Country Store and DeLynn and Gary's home and my farm. Now, I bought the farm in 2012 from my father, Don Whittier. And he had sold a right-of-way in 2000 to a man by the name of Peter Hicks. Peter Hicks owned 1/3 of the mountain, an undivided interest. Dick Bast owned 1/3 of the mountain, an undivided interest, and he's affiliated with Snowbird. And Earl Holding owned 1/3 interest in that mountain. So from the year 2000 until the year 2018, when it was purchased by Wasatch Peaks Ranch, I seen about everything that could happen, because anybody that was coming up to buy it, any investors, they wanted to talk to the person that owned the ground where the right-of-way was. So I seen everything from the beginning to the end. I seen them all, and there was a lot of different things that could have happened on that mountain. And being the one most impacted, and I mean that seriously, there's times when there's quite a bit of traffic going through my farm. From a civic and from my concern for the community and our tax base, to have a private resort come in that doesn't require all services, but pays taxes based upon what they own up there, and where it isn't going to interfere with our tax base because they're not comparables. And so it's a private resort. And as a private resort, it brings great benefit to the community on a tax basis for very little services rendered. Having said that, of all the things that I've seen in 18 years and then in the past 5, the best we could have hoped for as a county and a community is Wasatch Peaks Ranch. Because everything else could have been on our nickel and could have been devastating. I not only support them, but I believe on a county level, once again, it's the best we could have hoped for. And I would hope that people will find all the facts, and if they have questions about that mountain or anything that happened there, believe it or not, I know the history quite well. And I appreciate your time. The only thing I can say for you poor guys in the position you're in is that service does come with rewards. I hope there's enough reward to justify the terrible service at times you have to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, seeing no additional public comment, we do not have any presentations this evening. We'll move to action items. Before we do that, action item number 6 actually no longer needs to be addressed. So I'll look for a motion to remove that from the agenda, if that's okay.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to remove item number 6 from the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll start with action item number 1. Cindy Mikesell. Man, how'd you get to be first on the list?
Grateful for that, believe me. Tonight I'm bringing a resolution to the council to make Mike Newton Wasatch Integrated Waste Management District board member. So I just we need to.
They just have us do this every
year.
every year
Well, it's been
or
waxed
so.
a year, and she made me aware that it needs to happen. So I just need.
So I have been serving in this capacity for the last 4 years, and it's well, I guess 5 years now. It's been a pleasure to serve on that board. They're a great group of individuals. So.
I just assumed that you were going to be on it forever.
Well, that's my plan, at least for now.
Just really enjoys waste management.
Really enjoy dealing in garbage.
Is there a resolution number?
Do you want me to give it to you?
Yeah, if you will.
CR-23-17. Actually, it's CR 17-23. I got it backwards, sorry.
19-23.
I think it would be 23, because typically the year
Okay.
Yeah, it comes
goes
first.
before the number. And is there a form of resolution, or do you want me to, maybe I can create that and we can just
Do you?
formalize it later?
We had one before.
Did
we just need to find it, I
Oh,
guess.
okay. Oh, we
Or
have
you've
it.
got the form right there. Okay. It just didn't make it into the packet. Okay, so it's CR-23-17.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number CR-23-17, a resolution appointing Mike Newton to represent Morgan County to be on the board at Wasatch Integrated Waste Management for calendar year 2024.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, item number 2, this one we also do once a year. This is appointing a member of the commission to the UAC board. Commissioner Anderson, you're currently serving in that capacity. Is that something you would like to continue doing?
I really enjoy it, and you do it. There's been a few times absent, and Commissioner Fackrell's done a great job of filling in for me. So, because even though I'm on the board, he will attend most of the UAC.
I will attend it no matter what you need me to do too, so.
Yeah, I would like that.
Perfect.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we appoint Commissioner Anderson as a member of the UAC board with Commissioner Fackrell as the alternate.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 3. This is a ratification of the 2024 livestock predator control agreement with the state of Utah. I'll note that, and the agreement didn't make it into the packet, but I did send it out. It's same as prior, and Garrett, you had a chance to look through that. So it doesn't commit the county to any funds, just like it has been before. The county is a pass-through. The county treasurer will collect funding from livestock producers. They'll send that funding to, they'll actually send a check for double that amount to the state, and then the state sends a check back to us for the total amount that we send them. So that's kind of how the program works. They use that funding to help with predator control, primarily for sheep, but they also do a little bit for cattle as well. So
Has that amount changed?
the amount is, for this year, it changes every year. Let me grab the amount for this year. It's 7,000 and something. I'll have to go.
Thought it was a lot higher.
Sorry, give me just a second here. Here it is. $7,800 is the amount. So they'll collect that $7,800 from the producers and put that in the pot, and then the state gets a pot together of money, and then they use that. A lot of that is used to pay a state trapper, and it's also used to hire a helicopter so they can do coyote predator control from a helicopter, which is fun to watch if you ever want to come up to Croydon in the winter and watch them do that.
Okay, I'll make the motion to ratify the 2024 livestock. I will make a motion that we ratify the 2024 livestock predator control agreement with the state of Utah and the Wool Growers Association.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. You may note that on our agenda, the next item is a budget hearing. That item must take place at 6, and so we're going to continue down the list with our action items. We'll come back to that budget hearing at 6 p.m. We will move to action item number 4, Garrett Smith and Fire Department. This is on the sprinkler ordinance.
So I'm actually going to turn this over to Boyd. I kind of help get the items on the agenda, but it's really Boyd's item.
And one item I'll note while Boyd is getting up here is that this item will need to go to the Planning Commission for them to review, since it is land use related. So this will be a discussion amongst us. We can give some feedback, and then the Planning Commission will give their input to it and send a recommendation to the County Commission for final approval.
Yep, I'm just here to have a discussion on fire sprinkler ordinance. So the IFC is state law. The county adopted the International Fire Code, the IFC, under Chapter 152, Fire Prevention and Protection, and all the appendices. So the county has required fire sprinklers for many years when fire flow is not available. It's essential to have it documented in the county ordinance so we can reference it to builders. There are many reasons to require fire sprinklers. One of them is the lack of fire flow, which Morgan has a huge problem with. So a single family home under 3,600 square feet is required to have 6 60,000 gallons of fire flow. Anything over 36,000 square feet will require 180,000 gallons of fire flow.
Is that 3,600 or 36,000?
3,600. Sorry.
What does that equate into per gallon per, let's see, 45 gallons per minute? Yeah. What does that equate to then? 3,600.
So
No, it's 60,000 gallons, right?
60,000 gallons.
of fire flow for a 3,600 square foot home.
And there's
3,600
a
square feet
time
in.
frame in that, right?
Yep, a 2-hour. That one's a 1-hour flow. If we get bigger than that, then it's the 180,000 gallons.
So hopefully the wells work.
Yeah. Most of our water systems are 120,000 gallons in the county. Morgan City is probably the only one that's bigger than that.
But this is speaking to, I guess what we're focusing on are homes that are not connected to water infrastructure.
Right.
So we're specifically talking about a home with a well
Yes.
and the well keeping up.
This would affect any home in the wildland urban interface. So anything outside of the corridor here in Morgan City and through the middle of the valley. So much of Mountain Green, pretty much all of Croydon, all of the south end of the valley, Porterville, Richville area, that would all be part of the wildland urban interface.
Yeah, and I guess I have a concern with that much water coming out of a well, if the pump is functioning or not, if the well produces that much water or not, if the well doesn't,
Yeah, they'd be hard pressed to
lot of
have a well
concerns.
produce that much water.
An individual well, for sure, for a home.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So we're requiring them to have a system in place, but yet we don't know how they're gonna get the water there.
Right.
Okay.
So if we look at the IFC code book, section 507, so it reads fire protection water supplies. So required water supply. So an approved water supply capable of supplying the required fire flow for fire protection shall be provided to premises on which facilities, buildings, or portions of buildings are hereafter constructed or moved into within this jurisdiction. So types of water supplies. Water supplies shall consist of reservoirs, pressure tanks, elevated tanks, water mains, or other fixed systems capable of providing the required fire flow. That's where we get into an option. So if they can't produce the fire flow that we need, then we can offer the option, which would be sprinklers. So a 13D sprinkler system would be the other option. So a good example. So we just had this fire in Mountain Green. So we estimated we used 250,000 gallons of water to put that one structure out. 67 hours of manpower and a loss of $3 million. So that's not to mention any lawsuits that are going to happen, insurance costs, investigations, and the inconvenience to the community around it. You take that same home. If it would have had sprinklers, it would have flowed 13 gallons a minute with a design factor of 2 26-gallon heads. So no more than 300 to 600 gallons of water would have either put the fire out or slowed it down long enough that we could have got there and easily put it out. So we need to remember also that there's two threats when fire erupts. So wildland fires. So the threat to the community when the fire moves from the vegetation to the neighboring homes. The second threat is structure fires. They threaten the community when there's insufficient water supplies and fire moves from the structure to the vegetation and into the neighborhoods. So if we take that same home that we just had the fire in Mountain Green, and we have it here in the county and there's no fire flow and we're not requiring fire sprinklers, not only will it devastate the homeowner, but it could devastate the community if it's in August, a good wind behind it, and now the structure fire moves to the wildland and into other homes, and now it's cost the county millions of dollars to put out the fire that the wildland fire has created, or the structure fire has created in wildland. So millions of taxpayer dollars. If there's no fire flow and we require them to put the sprinkler system in, this will mitigate that issue. So that's what we're trying to do. Now, we're still gonna require fire flow. If we can't produce fire flow, we're going to offer sprinklers. So
So Boyd, in that situation there, if all the
Mhm.
sprinklers were turned on in that house,
Mhm.
it would be a total loss as well, correct?
Incorrect. So the rumors are with sprinklers, if one goes off, they all go off. That's not the case. So they have sensors on them now. So if that room and contents, just the one room, that's the only thing that's going to move any water. A 13D sprinkler system has anywhere from 300 to 600 gallons is all. So it's going to do the one room and the one room only. So as far as any water damage, if you think about the sprinkler head doing 13 gallons a minute, our fire hoses do 300 to 600 gallons a minute. So far less water damage with a sprinkler than if we were to pull a fire hose in there, even if it was a small fire.
So, just on the numbers real quick, Boyd. So you mentioned 6,000 gallons for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's 50 gallons.
60,000.
60,000.
60,000?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, that's worse then. I guess the concern I still have is if I hear that if you're up in an area where there's a lot of potential for fire to happen, that 100% makes sense. I'm just concerned that they're going to put a well in, and there will not be sufficient water coming out of that well. Well, according to the numbers we're going to require of them.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if many wells that are more than, 30, 40 gallons per minute. So I did 6,000 gallons in 2 hours. That's 50 gallons a minute. So if we're 60,000, I guess that'd be 500 gallons. I don't know. That's a lot of water coming out of the well.
And maybe there's a misunderstanding, because in the WUI, they're not drawing that amount of water from a well. So there's going to be a tank that is attached to the house that pulls the water in to limit it and hopefully prevent the structure from going to the wildland. The IFC, the International Fire Code, is what requires those flow requirements. The WUI is an exception to the IFC in areas where a water system is not practical or not available, right? And so we have the fire code official, Dave Webb, we have too many Daves. There's a book about that, I think. So we've got Dave Rich, we got Dave Vickers, we've got them all. But Dave Rich is our authority having jurisdiction, or our AHJ, under the International Fire Code, that can set the standards that are the exceptions to what the typical requirements would be, because in areas without a water system, it's impossible to get the required fire flow under the appendices of the IFC. So it's actually a benefit to those people that live outside of a water system to have less requirements. It's just saying these are the requirements that we want to prevent or to manage the issue that's already a big issue in the county. So I don't know if that clarifies it. We're not pulling from wells in the WUI. We're using a tank that can supply the sprinklers to put out the fire or restrict it until fire can get there.
I really understand the reasoning. I promise I do. I'm just seeing infrastructure required by the homeowner to be maintained and ran efficiently. I don't know if I see that happening. It sounds like now we're going to have a tank. We're going to have it pressurized. It's going to have to be a pump connected to it. That's going to, usually when you have pumps, you have to maintain and operate them often. You can't have a pump sit for 20 years and then expect it to run at a moment's notice. I understand why. I definitely understand why. I guess there's concerns of what all of this stuff looks like. And we've adopted these codes. I think these codes change without us as county knowing, but yet, do we see those changes every year? And I guess, or are we have to agree to the changes that happen on the fire code or any other or wildland code?
Yeah, so the wildland code that we have is 2006. That's the latest adopted by the state. But the state will adopt the new International Fire Code typically every 3 years. And so as a political subdivision, we have to follow that. But the state does carve out certain exceptions. And so, whoever is lobbying the state can say, hey, we don't like these fire flows, or we don't like this requirement for sprinklers. And so there are exceptions built into the state code, which the ordinance addresses. It's basically a copy of the state code and just putting it in our own ordinance. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we try to keep up. That doesn't mean we always keep up,
It adds to my
but
questions.
we're trying to keep up.
So I guess those are my concerns.
Yeah,
If we're
that's
requiring a
comes right off
homeowner
the
to
state
have
code.
infrastructure, in particular a pump, I've seen pumps in 5 years that freeze right up if you don't use them. So, I don't.
And who's gonna monitor all that? I mean, I know in my apartments, I have to have that done yearly. I have to have it inspected, checked, punch a little card, stick it on there, and
That's
what?
where we have a fire marshal, and
he's gonna go to all the homes? Seriously?
well, these are just questions that we can bring up, and
Yeah,
we can come up
I
with
think
some
that's what
answers.
needs to be discussed.
Right.
When I initially read this, I thought that what I was reading said that sprinklers would be required in any structure, any home in the wildland urban interface. Is that your understanding of what it says?
If there's no fire flow available.
If there's no fire flow
But
available?
where is the if there is no fire flow available language? Is that, so that's what I wondered, because you've got A1A, it's located, and then B says, and does not meet the requirements described in Utah Code 65A 82034A. Is that the exception that says if you have fire flow? Because the rest of the list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's all or, right?
So the WUI only applies if the IFC conditions aren't met. So the IFC is the highest standard. And if we say, well, there is no water system that we can even manage this, then that's where the lower standard comes in and say, okay, well, just to provide at least some protection, this is what we require. And I think, as far as the ordinance is drafted, that's something that I could take a deeper look at. I know Janet kind of worked with Boyd to pull the initial together just to get the discussion going. And we can cite to, I think it's section 507 of the IFC where it starts talking about those things. So I think this was just more of a general discussion point before we send it back down. And
If that's the case, I'm more comfortable with it. I mean, because if there's a functioning water system, that's infrastructure that people have helped pay for.
And in fact, the IFC, even with a water system, they say if the water system can't provide certain fire flows and you have you have a structure that's over 3,600 square feet, then even with a water system, the IFC says you've got to put in a sprinkling system which cuts your fire flows in half. Well, the Senate bill or House Bill 181, I think it was a few years ago, is where the state said, we're not going to follow that part of the IFC because we don't want to require our residents to put in sprinklers where there is a water system. So there's exceptions like that we're incorporating into our ordinance as well.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, as long as when you go through this and run it through the planning commission, let's make all of that clear. We may be just given a segment here, and so it's not connecting all the dots.
Yeah, I'd just give you a little bit of background because I was involved with this with the legislature when this was passed. There's really two things that we're looking at. We talk about the wildland urban interface. That's a whole different issue. We've addressed that with that. When this came about, part of it is to allow developments in an area without water supplies. It was mostly guided on what are we going to do when we have a 4-lot subdivision, something like that, and they need to put in a 120,000 gallon tank, water lines, hydrants, and everything. And for a 4-lot subdivision, can they afford to pay several $1 million to put that system in? So as we negotiated the compromise with the state legislature and stuff, we came up with this as an option that if you have a 1-lot, 2-lot subdivision, yes, if we have a full 20, 30-lot subdivision, we want the full municipal system. Everybody does. But if we have situations where we can't build that water supply, this is an option. And when we're mentioning about how do they maintain it, the homeowners do it. What it really looks like if you get a residential sprinkler system is you have another similar to a hot water tank, a little bit bigger because of your capacity. You have a small pump. They're usually, mostly times, they put them in the garages and stuff, because the idea is they're designed with a quick response head to go off in a lower heat situation than a commercial sprinkler system. Flow 13 gallons. They designed the system for 2 heads, which is 26 gallons a minute. The idea behind it is a 500-gallon tank, for example, should put out a room incontinent fire. Minimize water damage, like Boyd mentioned, when we come in with our 300-gallon per minute hose line. I guarantee you we do a lot more damage. But the idea is if we look at it in the whole overall thing, we're actually given an option for you guys to allow some homes in an area that it's just not economically feasible to put in a full-fledged water system. So here's an option. When we look at fire suppression, if you think about it, when we get a call for a 911 call, it takes a few minutes for the information to get gathered by dispatch. Then they have to dispatch it to us. So we get dispatched, and then it takes a few minutes. We do for a goal to try to get a fire truck out of the station in 1.5 minutes from time of dispatch. But then the other thing is if you add to it, if you live 5 miles from the fire station and the fire truck immediately left the fire station at 60 miles an hour and never dropped below 60 miles an hour, that's still 5 minutes to get there, not counting the dispatch time and everything. So the real design of the sprinkler system is so that we can maintain your better chance of survival for the home, protect the neighbors, because these day and ages we do get structure-to-structure ignition. And the whole bottom line is it's a way to allow, where a lot of this came up with was Kane County and some of the other rural counties, that basically if we didn't have some alternatives, building homes was done. Wouldn't be able to do it anymore because nobody could justify or have a hard time putting in those systems. So that's what it really is the sprinkler systems have come a long way. We talk about winter time and those, they have ways to cover that, but they even have systems where the sprinklers are actually tied into the homes. On new construction, they can design the sprinkler system. So it's part of your same water supply as your toilets, your sinks and everything. So it maintains a circulation. And also on a residential one, you don't have to sprinkler in the attics in different spaces that you do on a commercial one. So that helps minimize the cost of them.
This cost, when we're hearing people say this is gonna cost me $30,000 to $50,000.
Generally, what the average cost for a sprinkler system is anywhere between $150 to $3 a square foot is what they're averaging.
$1.50.
$1.50.
Square foot of the home or per linear feet per square foot?
The square foot of what the area that has to be sprinkled.
Am I misunderstanding this? Because I thought we said it was for all structures, but then item number 4 says the total floor area of all levels within the exterior walls of the dwelling unit exceeds 10,000 square feet. So is this only for structures 10,000 square feet and larger?
Actually, it's anything over
No.
1,000.
It doesn't say it's 3,600 in here at all, or 1,000.
Yeah, it does.
That comes into the fire code requirement.
If you're over 10,000, it requires it.
So what if you're under 10,000? It doesn't require it?
It does if you're in the urban, and you don't have that. Because that's a list of ors.
These are all ors?
Yeah, 1 through 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 10,000 is 4.
Where that
I'm
10,000
looking
came
at a
in
different
from
page.
is some communities adopted the fire code but didn't adopt the appendix and stuff for fire flows, and so they put in the 10,000 as anything over 10,000. But if you adopt the appendixes and stuff, and it drops it down to 3,600. And so generally, most of the jurisdictions I've been involved with, 3,600 was a trade-off. If it was less than 3,600 square feet, we didn't require sprinklers. And
So-
also if it,
That's what our current ordinance is, right? 3,600. So if I'm boiling it down to the bare bones, the change here is everything, not just over 3,600. Is that what the request is here?
Anything less, more than 1,000 square feet, and I'm trying to find it. It's only 200 and some odd pages, but you know, trying to find it. Okay, I'm sorry.
anything over 36,
Yeah.
I thought that's what
Still moving forward.
So, so I got a little bit of a tangent question here, but can you speak to the wildland urban interface area? Because I was talking to Boyd a little bit about it and sent an email to him about it, but, you know, it almost appears that it's a kind of a paintbrush, a blue area. And it's like, okay, where did that come from? Where are the boundaries? Because it would make complete sense also depending on the I don't know, the sagebrush, the
the
pine, or
history of the
whatever.
wildland urban interfaces, that came about in 2006. And what that basically is part of the cooperative wildfire agreement with the state for us to pay for wildland fires. if you have
Sorry,
that.
the question is, where did the boundary come from? Who dictates the boundary?
Yeah, who did that?
I just did. That was a requirement of that when it was established in 2006. And my other job that I did 10 years ago, or whenever 2006 was.
We might need to
we,
update that.
we brought that in, and that was part of the original agreement when you guys agreed to the cooperative wildfire. You had to put together that map, and that was done back when that originally happened. I was part of that when you guys did that.
Yeah, I just think there were some areas in Mountain Green and just some other areas that have been developed that we probably want to update that map would be my recommendation as we go through this.
That was my next move, was just get that over.
So within that map, you've got the map there that has, I mean, I'm looking up in Croydon. The blue area is not necessary because those are already okay with the water systems. Everything outside that is what we're concerned about, or not?
Now, what we're looking at is any area that if we have development, people want to put in homes and there is not the water supply, and it turns out to not be cost effective to put in the water tanks and the fire flow lines, which have to be generally 8-inch minimum water lines for fire to meet fire flow requirements and fire hydrants and all that. The sprinkler ordinance, the reason that the legislature let us do that is to give that option. If you're in an area we can't get fire flow, here's an option. You can still build a home in it. It's different from the wildland urban interface. That's a whole different thing and part of the cooperative wildfire agreement. So basically what we're looking at is if somebody needs to build a home or wants to build a home and they can't meet the fire flow requirements, then in reality, we're trying to be reasonable. That's our number one goal that we're trying to do, is make it so it's reasonable that people can have an opportunity to build in an area where we can't meet the fire flow as an option. That's what we're looking at trying to accomplish.
Including the garage, or is that
Living space. Garage.
But the 3,600 is not in the suggested text. The proposed text enactment is for every structure. It says any new residential structure, it has no square footage requirement in the proposed text. I would love there to be that 3,600 square foot requirement, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. in all of
Yeah,
that.
and you have that option. Like I say, when this ordinance was made, there were some communities that didn't follow the appendix part. They have to adopt the body of the fire code. That's state law. No option, do not pass go or whatever. But if you adopt the appendixes, which I believe you have, yeah, so it tightens up on that. So.
But I think we can add that in for the next draft just to clarify.
Yeah,
it.
I think that would be good. I mean, the way I read this right now, and I'm just trying to put this into practical. So Morgan Valley Drive, for example, looks like it is not in the wildland urban interface. However, on most of that road, there's not a water system. There are on both ends, I guess, but most of it there's not. So according to this suggested text, you would be required to install a fire sprinkler system in any new residential structure that's constructed in that area,
Yeah, get the system in.
regardless of the size of the structure.
Except under A6, it does say a single-family dwelling does not require a fire sprinkler system if the dwelling is located outside the wildland urban interface, is built on a one-lot subdivision and has 50 feet.
That needs some
so-
clarification, because there's no such thing as a one-lot subdivision, if you talk with our planning department.
There can be.
Okay.
But that's pulled right out of the state code, and maybe we can pull the definition of lot and subdivision and things like that into it, so it's really tight and easy to read from our code only. So I think that I
But
can.
the way I see that, if I'm dividing an existing lot and building a new house on it, again, back to my example on Morgan Valley Drive, under this, if we were to adopt this as it's written, I would be required to put a sprinkler system in it, whether it's 500 square feet or 1,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet.
On all
Correct.
levels. On all levels. That means if you have 500 underneath in a basement and 500 up above, it's still over 1,000, and you'd still
Well,
have to have
it doesn't say anything about 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It just says all
But
living.
it just says on all levels.
So I guess that's what I'm getting back to. I think that's something that we can discuss, and I'm sure the planning commission will have a lot more to discuss on it. The rest of it, I like the idea, and I think there's good to it, and I understand the need. My biggest concern is, in some situations, we're already struggling with affordable housing in the county. Nothing is affordable here. If you're gonna try to build an affordable home, say 1,000, 1,200 square foot home, and now you've got to put a fire sprinkler system in it, you're just increasing the cost exponentially more. And I understand the need to try to mitigate the risk, but I also feel like the smaller the structure, hopefully, the less risk you're placing on yourself and your neighbors, because hopefully it's not going to spread as quickly as a 6,000 square foot
You're
home.
correct. When the jurisdictions come up with the 3,600, that was the thing is, we're talking about fire load. Homes under 36, you're right, when they burn, they're not gonna put out as much heat, fire, all that other mitigating things as a larger home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like when I have people do burn piles, make them smaller and do, in some areas, I say, don't make a big giant burn pile, make smaller ones, and we can contain them better and control if there's a problem. So, same principle, it's fire load. Smaller homes, you're right, have a less fire load and less of an impact, so I think reasonable, I've always thought 3,600 was a reasonable, size of structure, so I would definitely support that. I think that'd be a good way to go.
We might get a lot of 3,599 square foot homes submitted.
Believe me, I have seen people that they design the home specifically for that, and they make sure that they're under.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Well, another concern I just want to make sure, and I think these are more just what we want to make sure we address, because I agree with Chair. This is, I think, will be a good process in the end. Another concern I have is if a developer comes in and says he wants 20 lots, and do we have a code that once it's big enough, we say you need to put in a culinary system? Because I worry that this might be an out for some if they say 20, 30 lots, and I'll just have them all fire sprinkled and I'm good.
I also feel like that's putting the onus and the cost on the individual homeowner rather than the developer. if you're gonna develop a large subdivision, I think you need to bear the cost of
So we
a system.
might want to make,
I guess ultimately it does, but
we might want to address
lose
that.
money. It's just they all pass the cost.
There is that 30, like in the IFC, like some people will do 29 lots or 30 lots or whatever, because there are some exceptions to fire apparatus access roads and things like that. And that might be something we could discuss and see if there is something to put in the code to say, if you go beyond this, then you have to do this. Well, and in fact, no, we have that in our code, actually. I should know this by heart. So,
what's that number? Do we know?
well, it's changed now. It used to be 81246 B2, but yeah, now it's 155 something. But it says where an approved water system is not available or proposed, the county will require to install at the subdivider's expense, and then it lists all of the things, and then it lists your fire flow requirements. So, and that is anything above 10 lots. Oh, is it 8 lots? Okay.
So there's the answer. Okay.
Yeah. So it does require that.
Sounds like one day we'll have the fire code designing our subdivisions for us.
Maybe.
You never know. Never know.
Sounds to me like that's what it's going to.
So as far as our action this evening, I guess the action is to send this to the planning commission for their review and discussion, and then ask for their recommendation.
I have a question though before you go, or before we do that. If I come in for an addition on my home, or I want to remodel my home, do I fall under this parameters of having to have a sprinkling system in it? Because now I'm going to be, I'll still be at 3,599 and 9 inches. Actually, it's 3,600 square feet. So my question is do I have to put a sprinkling system in the whole place, or what?
That would be expensive.
That would be way.
Yeah, I know.
It just says new structures. Currently, it doesn't say anything about additions.
I have
And I
to
don't
do
know if
an
that's something
addition
we
on
ought to discuss. So if we had the 3,600 square foot requirement in there, as long as your addition is under 3,600 square
Well, it'll
feet.
make it more than 3,600 if I do an addition.
I'm saying, but the addition itself,
Well, that's what I
if
wanna
it's under
verify.
that, it should qualify, right?
That's what we need to decide.
Yeah, and that's something I'm just curious about is how is it going to affect a new addition onto a house? And that's something that has to be addressed one way or another. It needs to be addressed because all of a sudden now my house no longer is 3,600 square feet, and it's not brand new, but my addition is going to, maybe make it 4,500 square feet. Do I have to go and put in a sprinkling system on that addition part, or over throughout the whole house? I mean, these are questions that I have. Is how is it going to affect us? And then I also have the question on, okay, these existing homes, or maybe in an area that, and I know a lot of them, that do not get 10 gallons a minute. How are they going to support a sprinkler system or the fire department coming? And if it takes on electricity to run that pump to be able to spread that water throughout the house, and you shut everything off because you have to if there's a fire going, what do you do?
Again, remember on a residential sprinkler, you have the tank, and the idea is that, and they're wired into a different breaker so that it's up and throws a breaker, they still have power. The residential sprinklers have to hold it until we can get there, and if there's no hydrant, we bring the water. I believe you saw our big water tent one day. You
Yeah.
came and visited up there. So we have to bring the water, but the idea is to keep it in check. If it keeps it in that one room, we can carry enough water to get it out.
Okay.
If it goes beyond that, remember fire doubles every minute is typically what they say is. So if you get a single room fire in a bedroom, for example, and there's not something to keep it in check, to keep it contained to that room, by the time we get there, it's gonna be down the hallway, and it's gonna be probably our main job when we get there to protect the exposures, to keep the fire from spreading, because the house is probably gonna be a write-off. If we're 10 minutes away, it's gonna be a write-off. We're not gonna save the structure.
Right.
It's not feasible to do that. But with the residential sprinkler, remember, just calculate best case scenario, 2 heads go off, 26 gallons a minute. Just add that up by 10 minutes. What's that come to? How many gallons? 260? Or we throw that in 1 minute on our hose. That's what the whole purpose is that your wells, they work. We built structures where they're not even on the well, they're out in the middle of the hoo-rahs. Remember, the sprinkler is being supported by that tank. All that's designed the sprinklers to do is that tank to put that fire out. So that's what it's for. Put that single room.
Yeah, I'm not against the sprinkler system. I'm not against that. I'm just concerned about the small, or the small flow of some of the wells or spring systems.
So
or
it's not
whatever they
tied
might.
to the wells.
Yeah.
And then with
But
regard
this
to
tank, how does it deliver the water from this tank? Say I put the tank in the basement. It's got to have pressure to go upstairs to take care of the house.
They have a pump.
Do they have that?
Think of a
Electricity
sump
is my biggest worry.
pump. Pump on the sprinkler system's like a sump pump. So just think you have a tank with a sump pump. So if you have a basement that has a sump pump,
I know.
we're not talking large pumps. We're talking about very small amount, like I say, it's small gallonage and a small pressure need. And they're just little small pumps. And they, think of a sump pump, except instead of taking water out of your basement to get it out of there, it's just supplying your system. Or if you get one of the systems that are tied in to your home water, culinary water system, same thing that flows through you just add
Okay.
that line into that tank.
Can I make a motion?
It's pretty amazing what they do now.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we refer the proposed sprinkler ordinance to the Planning Department and Planning Commission for recommendation, trying to incorporate as much of the discussion from tonight as possible.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Appreciate you coming in.
That was me, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a couple of minute break and then we'll go to our public hearing for the budget. Does that work? Okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene, and we will move into our budget hearing. Appreciate you being patient with our agenda this evening. So, we will turn the time over to our clerk auditor, Leslie Hyde, to discuss. These are amendments to the county's 2023 budget.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here seeking approval of Resolution CR 2316. The resolution will be amending the following budgets. It will be ambulance, human resources, public works, justice court, animal control, recorder, airport, planning, flood disaster fund, health services fund, and the recreation fund. We'll also be adding a grant for the library.
Before we go into the public hearing, are there any questions for Leslie regarding any of the budget amendments?
So what brought about all of these? I mean, 2 weeks ago or a month ago we did this.
These are all the ones that didn't get submitted on time,
Yes.
is what it boils down to.
Okay. Because a lot of these you're bringing them about and making them into a. I didn't get time to call you today.
Well, and some of them are things that you've committed as department heads or elected officials have come into your meetings, and so.
And to be fair, a couple of these we committed to after
Yes.
the last budget
Yes.
session. For example, I think the loader
Yep.
for the airport
Right,
was.
and I remember that. Yeah, I was just wondering, like, animal control. Why were we short benefits?
Because we benefited that position for a single person,
Oh, and then we
and
gave
that
them the
person
other.
left, and we hired a person that requires more than that.
Okay, well that's fine. I understand.
Justice court, I think, was just a calculation error.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with it. Now, the question I have is on this flood disaster. Are we taking it from, and I don't know which the 21-2951 is.
That would be the fund balance for flood disaster fund.
Okay, so that's not also from the fund balance, not the FEMA 1983 monies.
Correct.
Don't
No, this is
know.
from
Okay.
the flood fund balance. We're moving it into the regular budget and using a portion of that. Whatever is not used will go right back into the fund balance at the end of the year.
Yep.
Okay, because I'm just trying to figure out why we can't use some of that money for flood mitigation that we're trying to do, instead
Yeah,
of taking
we-
it from the fund balance and put it and take it
Have
from
used
that
some of that
other one.
money, haven't you, Austin?
Yeah,
we
we
can,
do some.
and we are using some of it.
Some,
Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah.
The money out of the flood mitigation fund, it is we have to use it for very specific things.
Right.
That 1984 money is I don't want to say it's too loud publicly, but it's unencumbered. I don't know if that's a good way to put it. There's no restrictions on those funds.
Except me.
Yeah, and I would hope you guys would.
It's just a broader use.
Correct.
Okay.
They're agreeable.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about using that right now. We're just talking about
No.
moving
Okay.
from the
No.
regular.
That's fine. I'm fine with it. I was just wondering if I just didn't want it to come out of our general fund.
No, not at all.
If it's coming out of the flood mitigation fund, I'm fine with it.
Correct. And I only anticipate using about 40,000 of that.
Okay.
It's for the project they're doing currently up on Highland Drive.
Okay,
We're about
good.
halfway
And
through
that's
that
all we
project
need?
right now.
That's all we need for, was 100? I thought it was higher.
Well, that's if Joe Biden would have signed the
Right.
disaster declaration, but we're still waiting on that.
Okay.
And again, this is 2023, so if there's expenses that come in 2024, they'll come from.
That'll be separate.
Okay. And then, yeah, that's all I had for your department. The other one is just the recreation. Why are we continuing to have things misdone in that one? You've got 4 different areas of recreation. that was budgeted in permanent employees but was paid from temporary employees, or the increase in benefits for the extra employees, or I didn't know we gave the extra benefits to other than one person.
Well, you've got FICA, you've got taxes that have to be paid.
Yeah, it
On
doesn't
some of her
necessarily mean-
programs, she's increased the number of participants, so that increases how many games there are. Every time she increases a program, there's increased time.
Okay.
And the $62,000 issue was, it was put in Cassell wrong,
Okay.
those employees.
I just,
And that's hard to know, Blaine, until everybody signs up. And you know how many people are
It's
going to
just
be
a guesstimate.
participate in the sport.
But we should also note that there's also an increase in fee revenue, so the revenue is also increasing here. It's not just the expenditure.
That's right.
Of course, the difference is when we go to do our audit, if we go over budget on expenditures, we're in
Then
trouble.
we're in
If
trouble
we
again.
bring in more revenue than we expected,
right.
they
and
don't
I'm-
care,
I
right? So
understand that.
That's why
because-
we're not adjusting the revenue, we're only adjusting the expenditure side.
Okay. I'm fine with
Okay, any other questions for Leslie? If not, we'll look for a motion to move to adjourn the public meeting and convene a public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
that. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I thought
Okay, we are now in public hearing regarding the amendments to the 2023 Morgan County budget. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will look for a motion to adjourn the public hearing and reconvene the.
So moved?
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We are now back in the budget hearing, and we'll look for a motion regarding, what's this?
I'll make a motion that we
Resolution.
approve Resolution CR-23-16, a resolution of the Morgan County Commission adopting certain amendments to the Morgan County 2023 budget.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Leslie, for your work on this, and I will just note for the benefit of the elected officials and department heads, if you go over budget this year and we get nailed on our audit, you're going to come in here and explain it to us.
That's exactly right.
So this was your last chance to get it adjusted. I hope that you got it in.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. All right. Where did we get to? Item number 5, action item number 5. Garrett, this is extension of a professional services agreement.
All right, so this is also one of Boyd's requests. It has to do with having a medical professional available for
Yeah,
the
offline medical control.
paramedic. Yeah. So
Yeah, so nor myself or Dr. Earl realized that the contract that we have with him actually expired in 2000. So we're looking for an extension.
2019, right?
No, I think
Or 21.
Yeah, December 31st of 2021 it expired. We have been fulfilling our commitment, payment commitment to him, so he's been fulfilling his job. But we do need to do an RFP on it and put it out for a recontract. But we'd like to extend Dr. Earl's contract for 6 months while we go through the process. So that's what we're doing now. The RFP is ready to put out right now. Garrett's went through it, made a couple of changes, so we'll get it out ASAP. We just need to we have to have a contract in place to have our license with the Bureau of Emergency Medicine, so.
When you say he's fulfilled his commitment, what does that constitute?
So, Dr. Earl is committed to at least 4 hours a month of training for us. And, or he can, if we need any of our, he keeps up on all the documentations. If we have questions on procedures, he's the one that fulfills those, and also keeps up on our medications.
So probably not a set amount, just kind of time and material whenever you need them.
No, there is a
we-
set amount.
It's 7,500 for 6 months. So it's 15,000 a year.
And that's been the case since 2019 when the last agreement was signed.
Right.
I was involved in that back then, so.
Yeah.
We don't have a copy of the current agreement here, we just have the addendum, so you're not seeing the dollar amounts, but that's been in our budget all those years, and we've been paying that amount all those years.
Right.
And it's staying the same for the next 6 months, that would.
Correct.
Yeah.
A little over
That's right.
$300 an hour.
You're gonna get an RFP out and see who wants to bid on
Yeah,
it.
according to county policy, we have to do another RFP. So we'll put that out. It's ready to go.
I'll note that when this was entered into in 2019, there was an RFP done at that time as well.
There was one or not?
There was. Okay, any other questions for Boyd?
Okay, I'll make, you ready for a motion?
Yeah, be
I'll make a
great.
motion that we extend the professional service agreement with Dr. Earl for the same amount that we've been paying him until we can get an RFP sent out and rebid.
Question on the motion. So this is an extension for the 180 days, is that?
Correct, the 6 months.
I'll second.
Motion, a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We removed item 6, we're going to move on to item number 7. This is budget increase for the indigent defense budget for 2024.
All right, so this is an agreement that mirrors the prior agreement that was signed as an interlocal agreement with the Weber County Indigent Defense Public Defender's Office. And indigent just means that they can't afford their own attorney, so it's a right under the Sixth Amendment that if they can't afford one, one will be given to them or provided to them. And so the county does pay for indigent defense within, all of our, well, you're only entitled to an attorney if you're subject to loss of liberty. So if you're just paying a fine for an infraction, it doesn't count. So that being said, I do get questions, well, why do we have to pay for our defendants? Well, it's because as a function of government, we are retaining constitutional rights, and we want to make sure that everyone has a right to an attorney so that they can be fully informed of their rights. So the only change from the prior interlocal agreement that was signed about 18 months ago or so is that it's going from $2,000 a month up to $4,000 a month. You may remember that I came in and requested going from $1,500 to $2,000 because of our increase and just the time that it takes to defend all of the defendants that can't afford attorneys in district court, justice court, and juvenile court. So the $2,000 was a pretty good deal. Since then, our cases have tripled in district court. They're up about 43% in justice court from what Judge Brower told us at budgets. They're up in juvenile court, and I think proportionally they're up even higher for indigent defense from what I've gathered. So I think that we negotiated this one really well to just double it, considering the increased caseload, and I'm just looking for an approval of that agreement.
Do we have are we doing a budget adjustment for this at the next?
I've already been approved
Okay.
for next.
So it's already included? Okay,
Yeah.
It's just the agreement that you're looking for approval?
That's right. And I did previously do a budget amendment to move from our appellate defense fund for the rest of this year because they gave us a notice of termination. And so I said, well, let's just see if we can keep you on board so that we don't have to put out an RFP and have a gap. So I was approved to increase that to 4,000 starting October. But this will be the agreement that just outlines for the next year that will continue at that price.
So do we need a resolution on it, or just this interlocal agreement?
Just an adoption of, or an authorization of the interlocal agreement.
Okay. I move that we, if we're ready, that is.
Yes.
I move that we enter into this interlocal agreement for the provision of indigent defense services with Weber County.
Second.
A motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move to item number 6. Jeremy, are you presenting this one? All right. This is. Did I say 6? I meant 8.
It's
Item number 8.
Wasn't
Thank
sure
you.
if I should get up. Thank you and good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the County Commission. Action item F8 on tonight's agenda is for application number 23.020. W Land Co. requesting final plat approval for the Rome Commercial Flex Space Units final plat, which would create 14 commercial flex space condominiums and is identified by the parcel numbers and serial numbers in your staff report, and is generally located northeast of the intersection of West Old Highway Road and the newly platted Queens Garden Road in Mountain Green. This plat has been through extensive review through our Department of Planning and Development and has met all of our minimum code requirements. Engineer comments have been addressed. Survey comments, if any outstanding, are minor and can be taken care of prior to recordation. And recently, fire comments have been addressed. There's a condition in your staff report talking about the entrance from West Old Highway Road to Queens Garden Road being too narrow. The applicant has worked extensively with Mountain Green Fire to work that out, and staff believes that's no longer needed as a condition, or at least that's been taken care of since the staff report was written. Staff therefore is recommending approval for this final plat. I, along with Josh, can answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is in the audience tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Jeremy?
I have a question for somebody. I don't know who it's for.
Go for it.
In the bottom of that item, walk over to it. Right there. No, right. Up, right there. What are those two little squares?
That first square is a parcel owned by Questar Gas Company. To the immediate east, you have the Warner West subdivision that was platted this year.
Okay, so that's part of Warner West, okay. Yeah, you can do that. Okay. 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 Right, what? And they're coming off of the Queens Road or whatever it is. Okay. 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 That was one of my questions, so. Okay, I'm fine now.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, we'll look for a motion on item number 8.
I'll make a motion that we approve Rome Flex Condominium Final Plat Application 23.073, allowing for a 14-lot subdivision of land located approximately 5852 and 5892 North Queens Garden Road in unincorporated Morgan County, based on staff report dated December 19th, 2023.
Second.
Was there any findings? There were no findings.
Does your second still stand?
Yeah,
Commissioner
still
Fackrell?
stands.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to item number 9. Are you presenting this one as well, Jeremy?
I am.
Excellent.
There's a little eraser down there if you wanted to. No, don't do that. Just
There.
Mr. Chair, action item F9 on tonight's agenda is for 2 applications going concurrently. Application 23.068 and 23.085. The applicant for this project is Chad Salmon. The property is located at 5738 West Canyon View Place in the Canyon View commercial area. The area is 1.51 acres, and the general plan designates this lot as commercial VOC, which is vehicle oriented commercial, and the current zoning is highway commercial. One of the major not issues, but with the project being approved, was there being multiple setback requirements. Setbacks for the building itself, and then there are setbacks from the parking in the lot. And so the reason for the conditional use permit application 23.085 is our code in section 155.369G states that deviating from these setbacks can be approved with the CUP, and it doesn't mention if that's approved through our office or anything like that, but because the Planning Commission approved that CUP along with recommending to this body, we're asking for your approval for that tonight as well, for both approving the site plan and the conditional use permit to allow the building to encroach within current setback requirements for parking. The landscape plan shows over 15% landscaping. The lighting plan looks good. Our photometrics plan conforms with our dark sky ordinance. Staff recommends approval, and the Planning Commission met on their regularly scheduled meeting on December 7th. Was December 7th, and voted unanimously to recommend approval to this body, 4-0, with members Stevens and Little both absent and Chair Sessions not voting. I can answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is in the audience tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I have a question here for you.
Yes.
In your information, it talks about that the site is fronting 2 separate county roads. I just want to correct you on that.
Okay.
There's 1 county road and 1 state highway.
That's it. Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Rights of way. 2 rights of way.
Yeah, 2 rights of way. And so my question is how is that going to, I don't understand how much of a setback you have to have, and how is this encroaching upon that? How much of a setback? It says minimum of 9 feet by 20. That's for the parking stalls. So I'm just curious what it is. Josh or you, Jeremy?
Minimum parking setback when it fronts the street is 25 feet. 25 feet would be almost all the way down to the building right there. So it would knock out a whole row of parking spaces. We felt that the conditional use permit should be approved because they're they're exceeding the minimum landscape requirements. They've added in a few additional trees in order to kind of provide for additional screening, and the lesser setback provides for greater circulation around the site.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for staff?
Is the driveway on the southeast corner going into an adjacent lot, is that just for connectivity?
In that circle?
No, You come in on the circle, if you made the right along the building, it looks like there's a driveway.
Bottom right.
And
Oh, yeah, that
I
one.
believe that's because they own both lots and is cross-access.
so it is a connectivity, okay.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
So if it's for cross-access, is there like an existing cross-access agreement required by the CCNRs for this subdivision?
So is there a reason for these diagonal gray areas on that chart that you have there? To go across the parking lot to the building? Is that utilities?
Those are the. That's for potential.
Crosswalk.
Yeah, crosswalks.
okay.
Pedestrian access.
I think what
And
you're
so the
pointing
one
to
out
is
front?
a grease trap. Is that right? Like, is that a grease trap?
I didn't know if it was a speed bump or what.
It's a commercial building. Do we know what the proposed use is?
We do not.
Oh. Okay.
Interesting.
Sounds good. I'm looking
Not a
forward to it.
Chick-fil-A.
Is that an all-year one? Okay.
Man, why'd we spend 200 grand putting pickleball courts in Mountain Green?
To prepare for
To prepare for this, that's
this.
fine. They'll still get used, both of them, I'm sure. Okay, any other questions? If not, we'll look for motion on item number 9.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the MTN 4 commercial site plan, application 23.068, allowing for the proposed commercial development located at 5738 West Canyon View Place in Mountain Green, based on the findings and with the conditions listed in the staff report dated December 19th, 2023.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll also move that we approve the MTN 4 CUP, application 23.085, allowing for the proposed commercial development located at 5738 West Canyon View Place in Mountain Green, based on the findings and with the condition listed in the staff report dated December 19th, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we will move to item G1, our first public hearing of the evening regarding the Croydon Acres subdivision First Amendment.
And Mr. Chair, actually, public hearing item G1. This should be an action item. It had an agenda request and was marked as a public hearing.
Okay.
And so without having to make any evasive maneuvers, that would be difficult. We'll just keep this as a public hearing, but I want to make it known that it is an administrative item, which is a request to amend one lot within the Croydon Acres subdivision for a lot line adjustment, which is a one-lot subdivision, one of the ones in the county. Identified by the parcel
How
numbers.
can you do a lot adjustment if there's only one lot?
I did go to Morgan High School, and they taught me that you can't divide
by zero.
by
One by
one by one.
But he's not wanting to develop that.
And a plat amendment is the way to do that because it is a lot in the subdivision. And Mr. Chair, it's identified by the parcel number and serial number in your staff report. The applicant and owner of the property is Mike Schultz. This is located at 1415 North and 6800 East in Croydon. Current zoning for this lot is RR1, that's rural residential, 1 acre minimum. The general plan has this also as rural residential. Until the plat amendment is accomplished, this is 4.5 acre. Actually, I took all of the parcels that it's affecting and the acreage of the lot, calculated that into 4.85 acres. The staff has reviewed this request and finds that it meets all minimum code requirements. Fire, planning and development, and engineering comments have all been addressed prior to tonight. There are minor surveyor comments outstanding that can be addressed prior to recordation. The Planning Commission also met on December 7th to hear this item. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval, 4-0, members Stephen and Little absent, and Chair Sessions not voting. Mr. Chair, I, along with Josh, can answer any questions you may have.
Can you point out there which portion is being removed from the subdivision? I was just trying to see the dividing line between the two, and I'm not seeing that very easily.
Yeah, I'm not either, so.
Okay, so the diagonal line is the new.
That's the portion, that would be the new property line.
Okay.
Everything else is
And being connected to the parcel.
Well, there's 2 parcels that are being affected.
Can you go back to the map of it, Josh? Page right there. We need to get that. I know you hate the mic, but when I
So-
review this at home, I do not see it or hear it. So,
Sorry. So they're pulling out the approximate 1 acre, and it'll be combined with the other lots that lead to the ranch, so that he can put in that driveway access. A lot or parcel combination doesn't require a plat. Just the removal of the portion out of the subdivision does.
So that parcel that's immediately to the north, that little square, is not owned by him. It's owned by somebody else. So how are they going to accomplish that?
My understanding is that there is some contiguous portion to the lot that they're going to combine. That was what was conveyed. That was the information conveyed to me. I believe the applicant may be in the audience, may be able to address that. He was here.
Okay.
maybe we need to have him come back
Well,
in.
if there's some connection, that's fine. I just want to make sure that, I guess that's a separate discussion as how that's going to be tied in, because what's before us tonight is simply removing it from the subdivision, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the combination will happen through another method.
Okay.
So I have a question on it. If it is, how much is left in that rest of that lot?
I
After you
believe
take
he
out that?
has he has R120 zoning, if I remember correctly, and he's got more. He's got like 2 acres left, a little bit more than 2 acres.
All
So he is not creating any non-conforming lot or anything by removing this portion.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Is this right on Lost Creek Road, or is it
This is on the road right below the cemetery.
also that road that connects between us and
The
Summit
road
County?
that we're all on right now, going over to Summit County.
So what's labeled as parcel 1 is what is being removed from lot 1 of the Croydon Acres subdivision.
That's correct. It will no longer be considered a lot because it won't be part of the subdivision.
Okay, and then these L1, L2 references, that's describing the perimeter boundary of the drainage pond.
I believe so.
I'm not following where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
you're
just
right.
down
That's
there.
part of the drainage pond.
Okay. So the separating line between parcel 1 and lot 1 is going through the drainage pond.
Yeah,
Yes.
more or less.
But it's there by easement, so I guess the property boundary doesn't matter. Okay.
I just saw the applicant walk out there. I don't know if he wants to come in, and he's not now. I know Mike's not there. Mike Schultz. So, okay.
Okay. That, I guess since we did this as a public hearing, we'll open and close the public hearing. So look for a motion to adjourn the public meeting and convene a public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We're now in public hearing. Item number G1. Seeing no public comment, we'll look for a motion to adjourn the public hearing and reconvene.
So, yeah. So you
Blaine
all
made a
sec-
motion.
Then he hit
Matt
motion
made
it.
the
Second.
He'll do the second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're back in the public meeting. Looking for a motion on item number G1.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval. No, that's the Planning Commission's motion.
Here it is for this one.
That we just approve, right? Not
Yeah,
recommend.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Croydon Acres subdivision First Amendment, application number 23.071, located at 1415 North, 6800 East in Croydon, based on the findings listed in the staff report dated December 19th, 2023.
Second.
A motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving to item number G2. This is also a public hearing. Discussion of the detached accessory dwelling units text amendment.
Typically, I would handle the text amendments, but Jeremy wanted a chance to try his hand at doing a text amendment. So if you're okay with that, I'll turn the time over to Jeremy and
Of course.
give it a go.
Thanks, Jeremy.
And good luck.
Yeah.
Jeremy's a glutton for punishment sometimes. All right, let's do it.
I've been here almost a year, just so you're aware. So.
And we love what you're doing, so thank you. Appreciate it.
So, Mr. Chair, public hearing, item G2 on tonight's agenda is a legislative action. This is a request for approval of text amendments to modify the following sections of Morgan County Code. That's, and again, these references have changed. 155.008, which is definitions in our land use title, and 155.341, which is the internal accessory dwelling unit section. The modification includes a definition for detached accessory dwelling units and language in Morgan County Code for how those will work in Morgan County. So a bit of context, there was a bill proposed at the Utah State Legislature in 2021 to allow for internal accessory dwelling units in all residential zones statewide. This year, our very own Representative Kira Birkeland sponsored House Bill 233 to allow something similar, but for detached accessory dwelling units. And that bill did pass, again allowing for detached accessory dwelling units in all residential zones statewide. And then for the benefit of the public, the staff was directed by this county commission to draft code text for an amendment here tonight. After extensive workshopping with the planning commission, I believe there was 4 meetings in work sessions and public settings to go over the language of the code, in addition to hours of drafting through our office. It's before you tonight. Staff has reviewed this code text amendments and finds that it meets all minimum code requirements for a legislative action. Our county attorney didn't have comments for the language of the text. We brought it to him, and this was heard in a public hearing in the Planning Commission's regularly scheduled meeting on December 7th, 2023, where the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of this item 3-1, and Member Bass voting nay, and Members Stevens and Little absent, and Chair Sessions not voting. Our office has received numerous calls and numerous visits, all in support of this detached accessory dwelling unit addition to our code. The sentiment is that it's very much needed as an option for parents who want to build a unit for their children on the same property, for children who want to build a unit for their aging parents on the same property. Lots of situations like that is what our office has heard. Mr. Chair, I can answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Commissioners, fire away.
You look at me first, like I'm going to do it first.
So
I knew you were going to have a question.
Jeremy, my
look at
question would be, as far as the short-term rental, you didn't have any comment on that from people, huh?
So that was heavily
Like
discussed in
VRBO
the-
or whatever.
That was heavily discussed in the Planning Commission work sessions, and our office had language talking about that. The language before you tonight says that short-term rentals shall not be allowed.
Understood. I just wondered if, what the public would, what our constituents, what they said.
A lot of the situations were kind of what I mentioned before about keeping it within the family and not renting it or anything like that. Those were people that mentioned that they wanted it mentioned, those situations specifically.
So, but then you do have a provision in there, as I remember, that it can be 5 other people not related.
That's because we follow the federal definition of a family, which includes blood relatives, but it also can mean 5 unrelated individuals living in the same house. The federal government doesn't discriminate in that definition. Neither can we.
So you can have.
So you could rent
You
it.
need to have blood or family as described, but you can also have 5 non-blood. Is that?
Up to.
The short term.
Oh.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, so it's discrimination to call somebody not a family if you don't have their blood? I'm a little confused here.
The federal government has chosen to define family, and they define family in several ways. As many blood-related and blood relations are defined in the federal code. Typically, it's parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, things like that. But then, a family is also defined by the federal government as 5 unrelated by blood. So if 5 people wanted to rent the house together or whatever, as long as it was less than 5 and 5 people or less, then they meet the federal definition of a family.
Okay, I have a question on that.
And that's also in Utah Fair Housing as well. And if you recall, when we had a CUP application for a residential treatment center, that's how it's defined in our code is, up to 5 people, except there's an exception for disabled people in our code where you can go up to 8, and that's what our code allowed to go to that residential treatment center. So it is something under fair housing that it's not just federal, it is on the state level as well.
Nobody seems to be able to define that.
Okay, I have a question on that though. I'm just gonna use me as a scenario. Again, whether or not I'm gonna do it or not, it doesn't matter. My family, one of my families consists of 6 people. None of them are blood related. Can I not have them in a DAUDU? That is my adopted kids.
Are they adopted?
My adopted daughter and then her 4 kids.
Then they're
but there's not a
legally
single
yours.
blood relation.
It's
Blood or adoption.
blood or adoption. It's legal relation.
But it's 6 instead of 5.
But if it's a legal relation, then it's not an unrelated person.
I just want to make sure, because I'm not the only one in this county like that. So I want to make sure that we're doing it correct. That's all.
They would be considered family. Under
Okay,
the blood
so if she
relation
goes and
of-
has 2 more, we're okay?
Yes, if
That's
you
what
have
she's
a
going to.
multi-generational family related by blood or adoption, the
We're okay. You probably aren't gonna be,
The
but-
5-person limit does not apply.
Oh, I might be better off than I am
Can
now.
cram kids in if they're related by blood or adoption.
Okay.
But you might not be able to adopt them if you don't have separate bedrooms for them.
Are we putting a limit on how big these can be?
Yes, it says that they are a minimum of 400 square feet and a maximum of 75% of the original structure.
That's great.
Of the primary structure.
Primary structure.
Okay. And I did notice the one comment in there by Dave Rich, that if it becomes regarded as a barn, and you put a building above that barn, that kind of a thing.
If somebody has an ag exempt barn where they have converted it to a detached accessory dwelling unit already, then it is an illegal structure, and they would need to come in and go through the process to make it a legal structure. And part of the enforcement section gives, from the adoption of this code, gives individuals 6 months to bring their properties into compliance.
So I just did the calculations, so 75% of 3,599 is 2,699.
Well, I'm not gonna give her that much room. So there's not gonna be and I did not see this in here, maybe there was and I missed it, where if you were to put one of these on a 2-acre piece of ground, can you?
Yeah, you can.
As long as you're within the residential zoning district.
Yep, as long as you're within a residential zoning district, as long as you meet all setbacks for a primary structure, and as long as you meet all the requirements for lot coverage, then yeah.
Yeah.
And if you happen to be in an agricultural district, there's a whole nother code that could be used. You could do the farm worker housing to accomplish the same thing.
Or a recreational park or whatever. Yeah, there's other means to do it through the A20.
So a restriction I would see on this, I think it's a good thing, I really do, for a lot of residents, but the restriction I would see is if you're doing this on a lot that has a septic tank, that could be, you're adding another structure and there might not be room for that.
If you're going to come in for a building permit to construct a detached accessory dwelling unit,
Gotta go through the process.
you would have to go through the state certification process for that septic tank, and you'll probably have to prove to the Weber Morgan Health Department that that septic system is large enough to handle both dwellings. If not, then you will be enlarging it.
So all these dwellings that are being built by Rome down there that people are buying to rent out, is that included in
those
these?
are townhomes, those aren't
Yeah, those
accessories.
But those are short-term rentals, so they can just do that?
Well, the water would have been accounted during the subdivision process itself. So they've already got certifications through, I believe, Highlands Water.
And
Highlands
this only applies to, as far as the short-term rental section, this only applies to ADUs. Now, we have a separate area, I guess, in the code that addresses short-term rentals, and maybe that should be addressed in another discussion.
Okay.
In general, for
So this is just
primary
short-term
structures.
rentals of ADUs?
This is just ADUs,
Okay.
yeah.
But it does sound like we might need to address that.
Detached ADUs. So in other words, if you wanted to bring your mom and dad and put it on your place, put it above your barn, put an elevator in there and have them get up there, but you could do that. They might enjoy the ride, but that's a potential you could do and make it into that. I did find out the taxing on that from our assessor, and if they did have an ag building, supposedly that it would be an ag building, and they put a family living quarters up above, it changes the whole status of everything that building is. So, just a word of caution. Make sure it's agriculture, or else you're not gonna get the exemption for agriculture.
My guess would be if you add another structure on the property, that's just gonna be included as your total assessed value.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the assessor has sent the building permits that are issued for that.
So they know.
Is
Okay.
is there a tie to affordable housing with this? Because I think it could really help.
It could be.
So, anyway, just a thought. Sorry, go ahead.
You gotta bring that up to the UAC board. See if that works.
That's a good idea to help meet that requirement. Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, if not, we'll look for a motion to adjourn the public meeting and convene a public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Oh, and Tina, we did find out you can move that all the way down.
Yes, they moved it out here in front. for
I
me.
know. I know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll hold it.
He proved it to me earlier.
So Tina Kelly, Kelley. I like to see it spelled correctly. I did talk during the planning commission, and I did sit through their work sessions on this, and I appreciated the work that they did. They really did listen to some of the concerns, and the reason for the no short-term rental was to address affordable living, affordable costs. They said if you allowed them to be commercial and or Airbnb and short-term rental, then you would be doing away with your chance to do affordable living in the community. So that's why they addressed that. I had concerns about it because I have this idea of people trying to subvert the zone. If it's R120 or if it's A20, then it should be one home for 20 acres or one home per half acre. And then now you're trying to get two homes, but they addressed those issues, and I really appreciated that. I am still concerned about not having a shared meter, but apparently the engineer said that the utility company addresses those issues, and my concern was that they not be able to sell it as two properties, and that's also one of the areas that was brought up, and they added that in there, so I appreciated that. But that was the concern I had, because we used to have a better accessory dwelling unit and had to modify it because of all the things that people were trying to take advantage of and misuse. So appreciate the work that's been done.
Sounds like you got everything you wanted, Tina.
So what were some of the other things you didn't get?
This meter.
Oh, just the meter.
I thought I read that the utility meters would be shared.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Oh, it's in here. I just read it. Oh, that was on the attached, not the detached.
That makes more sense.
But, I mean, in terms of that, I mean, people have separate meters on their barns and things like that, so that's not necessarily a...
What do you
14C, oh, bringing existing into compliance. Let's, seeing no additional public comment, let's look for a motion to adjourn the public hearing and reconvene the public meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the public meeting, again discussing item number G2. And there was a question about 14C, which relates to those ADUs that were constructed prior to this ordinance and bringing those into compliance with the current ordinance.
I have a question. Yeah,
Josh, do you want
I'd
to
like
address
you
that?
to talk about it first. Go ahead.
Oh, you want me first? So the way enforcement works currently, because of our staff levels, is we operate on a complaint basis. So when we get complaints, if there's a detached accessory dwelling unit, we will see if a building permit was issued for it, or if the assessor even knows that there's an accessory dwelling unit there. If there is not, and there is an enforcement issue, we will send out a notice of compliance, giving them 10 days to come in and discuss it, so that we can kind of work towards bringing that property into compliance. If they ignore that, we send out a notice in compliance, which gives them 30 days. And if they still don't come into compliance after that, or at least create a roadmap for compliance, then I would turn that over to the attorney, and the attorney would either choose to pursue civil or criminal charges. If he pursues criminal, it's a Class C misdemeanor. If he chooses civil, it's $100 a day for every day that it exists. The code,
deficiency.
yeah, the violation.
Okay. It's not necessarily a question to Josh because I've already found out an answer, but it's for you guys. This was something I talked to the assessor also about, and Josh, and that is if we were to allow people, because right now if they come into him because they've got a barn and they've got an accessory dwelling above that barn, living quarters, if they come into Josh to report it, they're going to be charged double because they probably did not get a building permit to begin with to build that accessory dwelling unit up there, or occupational place where they lived or live. And so one of my thoughts is on this, and this is a separate subject and we can discuss when we want to discuss it, and this is on this, can we allow people within the county to be honest by having them come in for the next 6 months and not have them have to pay the double building permit that they did not get on these kind of situations? And if we did that, it allows them to come clean, because there's a lot of them throughout the county that are doing that right now. And then that way, by doing that, maybe they didn't think they had to have that, because that is a lot of the cases. They did not think they had to go and get a building permit to do those things. They've just done it. And so maybe if we were to give them what's the period called? Amnesty period or something like that, where we say, okay, if you come and pay your building permit and get the permit to make sure everything is correctly done, but if they don't after 6 months, then we can give them not just a double the fine, maybe a triple the fine, just to try to get this. I mean, our code says right now they have to pay double. If they did not get a permit and they built something without that permit, they have to pay double, just like we had a month or so ago. And so my suggestion is just that, is potentially making it an amnesty period to have people become honest. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. I mean, I found out today I'm going to have to get a permit to put in a new furnace. Because it's not in the exact same place as the other one.
That does bring up a question. If somebody's built a structure, and are doing this currently, and we ask them to come in and pay the fees, how do we know it was built correctly if there was no inspection done on it? And what does the inspector do to say, yeah, that it's not leaning, looks good? I don't know.
There are ways that the building inspector could get them to prove that it was constructed correctly. Some of them may not be very inexpensive. They probably would be a little bit expensive to prove that. But again, we're talking about life safety issue here. And so if they have constructed these and they're already using them, these are illegal structures currently. And not only should they have come in to get a building permit, but we wouldn't have issued a building permit because they're an illegal structure currently, unless you approve it tonight. However, those structures, there's no guarantee that they've been constructed according to the International Building Code. They would have to prove that to us. And I think the double fee is still kind of minor compared to $100 a day for every day that the violation has existed. That could be expensive.
So I don't know, I didn't feel like my concern was addressed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I guess the thought I have is it's one thing to charge them extra or say that they did something illegally when they built the structure.
Yep.
But it's another thing to have the building inspector walk out, the structure's built. You don't know where the wires are running, you don't know where the heating and air ducts are going.
True.
There's no way for that building inspector to say it was done correctly. So do we just say, give us the fees and we'll put a stamp that says close enough?
No, they would have to prove. There are ways that you can determine whether the studs are. There's ways you can determine. I was talking to Dave Webster about this a couple months ago. One instance, he required an x-ray machine to come out and x-ray the foundation to make sure the rebar was put in space correctly. So there are ways to do it. It's not always cheap. But, you know, if you do it the right way and get a permit and go through the right process, you know, it's going to be easier on you. But again, this is life safety issue. So if those detached accessory dwelling units that are currently being used right now burn down and there's a loss of life, then there's huge liability there. We need to kind of curb that. Give them a chance to come in and prove it was constructed, and the building official would be the one to determine how they need to do that.
Okay. I would love to tag along one of those.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
Garrett, back to Commissioner Fackrell's comments, I would suspect that in order to do something like that, we'd need an ordinance that specifies that we're going to change the double requirement for a period of time in specific situations. Would you agree with that it needs to be an ordinance?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it might be a temporary one like we did with Lee's Market that's in place for 180 days is what at least the state code allows. That's the high side. And I think it goes along with the 6 months here.
And I think that's a good idea. We just need to do it properly, so we probably ought to put
And I
an
could
ordinance
have that
together.
ready for January 2nd, I think, is our next meeting.
One of the reasons, though, that you're having them pay a double fee is because of the additional time required in order to conduct inspections on a previously constructed building on
Which
a
may be
post-hoc basis. So it's, maybe there's a reduction, maybe it's not the full thing, but anyway.
Yeah.
They'll have to pay a lot. X-ray a foundation.
Oh, yeah, if that third-party cost, they're still going to be.
They're going to be paying a lot of money. I'd be
Well,
surprised I'd be very surprised if we get one that comes in. Just my thoughts.
I think that would be another discussion for when if we go that direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just, you know, I just want to try to make it to where people will try to come clean, which will be difficult. But I mean, if they know that they're going to have $100 a day, since their neighbors know about it.
We could wait till the first person that comes in and submits.
Or we can wait 6 months and then start charging them all the $100 a day.
Well, there's 4 ways to enforce the code, and so I don't think, I mean, I don't want to necessarily be involved in spending my time doing that. I understand it's health, safety, welfare, and so I'll do what I do, but there's actually 4 ways to enforce the code. It can be criminal penalties, civil penalties, as Josh has described, third-party enforcement by like a resident, you know, and then it could also be by a citation from the building code official. So those aren't the only 2 options, but you know, we'll look at our code and decide how to enforce it.
Okay.
So I've been talking way too much tonight. I think I'm going to try and beat Commissioner Fackrell, but I guess I'd also be concerned if we'd want to make sure that we're following the codes and standards at the time, right? Because there's no structures that were built in 1973 that comply with our current codes and standards. So.
That's correct.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
I
don't
can't
know.
tell you whether detached accessory dwelling units back then were allowed or not. So.
Well, yeah, and if we're
but you're talking the building code is what you're talking, not
and saying
whether they were allowed or not.
Yeah,
It's just the
yeah.
building code.
I've been in older
If they were
homes
allowed
where-
back then they're grandfathered, and we can't require anything. So I don't know.
That's
when
actually a
they-
good point that,
So,
that I think Tina brought up, is that there was an ordinance in the past. If that's the case, many of these may still be, legal structures if they were constructed during the time period in which there was an ordinance.
Well, and I'm talking specifically building inspection. So Dave's gonna have to be very careful about the years that the structure was built to see if it complied with the codes at that time, because it very well could have. I've been in an older home, lived in an older home where I think there's been like 6 breakers for the entire home. And I went to break it, the breaker, fixing an outlet, and it welded my screwdriver to the outlet, and it still didn't trip. But my guess is it was built correctly at the time. So
Well-
anyway,
We could add a provision in there that says that any structure that was constructed prior to 2010, we'll assume was built under the previous code that existed. The current code draft was drafted in 2010. Obviously, there's been changes since then. That would be my recommendation, that anything constructed prior to 2010, that way, anything after that, it's pretty much the international code.
So that being said, do we need to make an amendment to item 14C that indicates that if it was constructed, not just prior to adoption of this ordinance, but during a time in which there was an ADU ordinance, that it's exempted? Or do you feel like the current language is sufficient?
I think that we need to put in the 2010 or whatever date, because then for enforcement purposes, I think that's helpful, so that, my office has an idea on what is grandfathered in or what's being exempted by
So we just need
this
to know what
code.
that date is then. Is that something you have readily available, or?
I would base it on the current code adoption date, which was 2010.
Okay.
The original adoption of our current code was in 2010.
January 1?
I don't know. I would base it on January 1, 2010, but I don't know if that was the date it was adopted.
Well, that was in 2010, it was adopted similar to what we just did a couple months ago with our current version. So our current version is the 2023 version. And we were, from my understanding, I wasn't here, but my understanding is every 10 years, we went through a similar process to what we just did to get our 2023 code in place. And so if we did go with just I don't think it was January 1st, 2010, but if that's the date that we decided for purposes of enforcement, that's the general plan.
That's the general plan, but are we talking about the building code adoption?
No, the zoning ordinance adoption. Because the building code is readopted every few years. The 2021 was the last time the building code was the last adoption. Before that, it was 18.
No, building
ABC.
code, the IBC.
This is, it's back to the comments I was making. If they built this additional structure in 2010 and they're trying to come into compliance, then Dave's gonna have to go out and say, what were the 2010 building IBC codes and requirements at that time, to see if the building was sufficient for those codes at that time. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting, to say the least. Like I said, I would love to tag up on it.
Or Dave Webster may say you need to hire an engineer that's going to put a stamp on those plans.
So this is our prior code, the 2010 version, and the adopting ordinance that I found in the front of the book says approved, adopted, and passed and ordered, published by the Morgan County Council this second day of February 2010. So maybe that's the day that we say.
Okay, perfect. Let's use it. All right.
I have another question. So if they live in an agricultural zoning, will this apply to them?
Yeah, it'll apply to all residential. However, there are other ways, other things that they could apply for. The Schlichte Dude Ranch is an example of that. They applied for a recreational kind of campground dwelling area, so they were able to put additional dwellings and their dude ranch on a piece of property. So there's other options in the ag besides the detached accessory dwelling unit, but it would apply to that too.
Because in here in number 12, it says that if you have a, well, it talks about tiny homes, but if you had a, or just a regular travel trailer that part of your family was living in because the other house is not big enough to handle them all, and you're in an A20 zone, or whatever it is, does that mean they can't do that, even though it's temporary?
Recreational vehicle parks are allowed in specific zones. If you want to bring up the zoning, we can look at the list of uses in 820 to see if it includes recreational vehicle parks. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm just kind of curious, because there's a lot of that around too.
Recreation vehicles are not constructed to the International Building Code. They're constructed to a completely different set of codes, and they're not
Nor are
supposed
they
to be
constructed
used.
the HUD code. They're not long-term residences.
Well, the HUD code allows for manufactured homes, specifically double wides, if they're over a specific square footage, to be considered single-family residential, and they are constructed to the IBC. The recreational vehicles are not. And the tiny homes, they're sub 400 square feet typically. The average is about 325 square feet. They're not constructed, so the measurements for an RV are measured from the outer circumference, whereas IBC measures individual rooms inside. So there's a completely different set of requirements, codes, and other issues for recreational vehicles, which is why they can't be used and should not be used for permanent habitation.
Okay, so under this ordinance, if we adopt it, and I mean, we're adopting it for anybody that's a family member to be detached, thank goodness. But,
That clarification on that, it's not for anybody that's a family member.
Well-
You could rent it to anybody,
so you can rent it to others.
just not as a short-term rental.
Okay, all right. Because, I mean, some of the older people that need this help, if they wanted to build it and put something there, at least they can have some income to help pay the property taxes.
The definition of family was put in there because if you do choose to rent out your accessory dwelling unit, then the occupants of the accessory dwelling unit need to comply with the definition of a family. So if you were to rent out the ADU to another family, then they could have as many individuals that are part of their family, up to however many, as long as they're blood related or adopted according to the state and federal code, or 5 unrelated individuals.
Okay. All right, I'm fine. Now I just gotta come up with money.
So the amendment to 14C would be any existing detached accessory dwelling unit that was constructed prior to the adoption of this ordinance, but after February 2nd, 2010, shall be considered a violation? Is that what we're thinking?
That sounds good to me.
So 2010 is when we had the old one in place, is that correct?
It was adopted February 2nd, 2010, from what I can gather from the book.
I think we might end up splitting hairs a lot here if we try to get too deep in this. The intent, the overall intent, I think, is we want to allow these moving forward. We want to make sure they're safe for the public. So the intent is, let's get any that are currently out there that may not be legally constructed to become legal units. I mean, we could probably get into a lot of nitpicky if we try to dive in too deep.
Well, what if we said, except for a legal non-conforming structure, any existing detached accessory dwelling, because then your date, it's on the applicant or the owner to establish that at the time that they did it, it was a legally conforming structure.
I like
I
it.
could agree with that.
Yep,
I would like
perfect. And then we don't have to worry about dates, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Agree
sounds
with
like we
that.
got a motion in the works here.
He's doing it. I don't know what we're gonna do next year. Not next year, but the following year. No. No, I'll do research, but I won't do the attorney stuff. Go ahead.
Well, that would just be one more job you would be
Oh,
able to
yeah, I
see.
know. I'm so tired of all of it now.
So the motion that was proposed is relative to the definitions and the accessory dwelling units, but don't you want a motion approving ordinance number CO 23-21?
Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number C0-23-21, in addition to the Land Use Management Code for Morgan County, amending sections 155.008, definitions, and amending section 155.341, accessory dwelling units, paren ADUs, close paren, comma, to add code language for detached accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as detached accessory dwelling units code text amendment, and establishing an effective date, with the following addition to section 14C of Part D. Adding, except for any legally conforming structure at the beginning of that sentence. So except for any legally conforming structure, comma, lowercase a, any existing detached accessory dwelling unit.
14. So how do you
We have a
say
motion,
that?
we have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Did you have a question, Commissioner?
A question on that motion. Okay, not on the upper part, the lower part. Okay, I'm looking at it here on 14C. How would you state that?
So the sentence would start, except for any legally conforming structure, comma, any existing detached, and then the rest
Okay,
of the sentence
that's
stays
fine.
the same.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Josh, I know that was a lot of your time and energy's been spent on that. Thank you. Jeremy, you as well, just for the preparation and work that's gone into that. And thank you to the Planning Commission for all their work on it as well.
I appreciate that.
All right, we have one more public hearing this evening. That is item number G3, Plan Community Zone Text Amendment.
As much time as we spent on the detached accessory dwelling unit, it doesn't compare to this one.
There's
Is
moans
that
from the back of
positive
the
or
room.
negative?
Okay.
So we have held multiple work sessions and public hearings with the Planning Commission. We have brought it before you. I believe this is the fourth time. The changes that we made during the meeting last time did not save for some reason, so I re-listened to that entire portion of the last county commission meeting and made the changes according to the discussion that we had. I went through the Salt Lake City ordinance that Commissioner Wilson sent me. I was not able to find any criteria that were in there. I saw a lot of submittal requirements and such. So I've taken a stab at the criteria. If you could scroll down to 155.450D. Yeah, right there. These are the 5 criteria that I came up with in order to try to provide some criteria going forward for you as a commission as well as future commissioners to determine when to reduce the acreages of rural residential and other residential and commercial developments. If you want, I can read those. Number one is the proposal would provide additional benefits to the county above the requirements of this ordinance. Number two, the proposed development incorporates additional inventive measures that provide for housing affordability. Three, the proposed development will incorporate additional measures to promote efficient land use patterns. Four, the proposed development would lessen congestion or improve on areas of access. Or five, the proposed reduction of acreage would allow for the preservation of an environmental resource or promote a more pedestrian-friendly environment. And obviously, it would be incumbent upon the developer or applicant to argue these and prove that they have met those criteria.
So that's to reduce it from a 50-acre minimum to as low as 15, but not lower than.
That's correct. So the language that I have in there now says that incorporates residential development shall contain a minimum of 50 acres unless otherwise approved by the county commission. However, any such reduction shall not be less than 15 acres. And then I did something similar for the multifamily, commercial, and industrial development as well.
Thank you for adding that criteria. I like that a lot. I think it will help show intent to future commissions. Okay, commissioners, questions or comments?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn the public meeting and convene the public hearing.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are now in public hearing on item number G3.
Tina Kelly, Mountain Green. I just want to be on record that I really don't like this ordinance, but I know that you want it as a tool for people to be able to develop their property. I spent 8 years on the county council dealing with all of the PUDs and PRUDs that were created by the last ordinance, and all it was problems for us. And I hope this one will, with the work that's been done, will be better for you. I hope with the things that you outlined just a moment ago, I hadn't heard those before, that will set some standards in mind going forward with it, that it won't be utilized incorrectly. I just wanted to be on record because I don't know from one meeting to the next what follows. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no additional public comment, I'll look for a motion to adjourn the public hearing and reconvene the public meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Don't or not?
It's recorded. So,
Okay.
okay. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thanks for keeping us on track, though.
Okay, so
Commissioner
who made the motion? Because I know that's one of the questions she gets sometimes.
Wilson.
You made the motion?
Commissioner Anderson made the motion.
To go out of it,
Oh, it's on the recording as well. It's on this one. So.
All right, well, in case she has a question, we'll just...
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right. PC zone text amendment. Are there any other questions or comments for staff before we look for a vote on the item? Okay. Yeah, we like Josh said, we've seen this, I think, 4 times now, so we've had a lot of opportunity to comment on it. I know the Planning Commission has done a tremendous amount of work on this as well, so I was thinking back, I would guess it's been more than a year since we tasked you with working on this, so it's been a very long process. That's because it's been actively being worked on, not just because it's been put off. I should note that. So thank you. Appreciate the work that's been done. All right, we'll look for a motion on item number G3.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number C0-23-19, in addition to the Land Use Management Code for Morgan County, amending sections 155.008, definitions, and adding sections 155.455 through 155.464, planned community PC zone, to create a new zoning district, otherwise known as the Planned Community PC Zoning District Overlay, and establishing an effective date of December 19th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, that brings us to our commissioner comment section of the meeting. I don't have any new comments. I'll just, for information, the Croydon Bridge project is on schedule and moving forward. They were able to pour the deck late last week, so it's looking good.
An on-schedule meeting.
Still planning for one lane open first week in January. So we're a couple of weeks away from hopefully one lane open.
First week of June, did you say, or
No,
January?
January. Outside of that, I don't have any other items other than to just thank the county staff, department heads, elected officials for all your work in 2023, and we're looking forward to 2024. So thank you all. Commissioner Fackrell.
I'll just give you an update a little bit on WFRC's Economic Development Group. Just for everybody's information, what they would like to do is a little bit more regionalization of county partnerships, which we talked about a little bit before. There's one area that they were talking about with Amanda Toulis from Davis Tech, and this was a surprising number for me, is that Davis Tech is only used by 25% high schoolers. 75% of them are by adults, which means try to gain another career. And another thing with that is they're using it as not just a career, but they're using it as a stepping stone to get a degree at a college, because they're starting to get more and more people that, they just want to be able to make an income good enough to pay for college. So, and it's surprising that also 63% of the students there are male and 37% are female. And so anyway, it was just, they've gone and they've changed it to where if they've changed to meet the business's needs versus just having a set curriculum. They've tried to make it to where small businesses which are considered less than 500 employees, if they're doing a custom fit program, and they will actually up front, they will do 40% of the cost of training their employees. So if you know of businesses, not just us, but if there's any in the public, if they know of businesses that are needing training for employees, then they need to get a hold of Davis Tech with Amanda Toulis and talk about the custom fit program, which I think would be a benefit. It might help some people. Also, the Northern Utah EDCU, they're looking for more partners. And looking for inventory of potential real estate to put into a real estate database, so that way when a business comes, that they can go and say, okay, this is a good fit for Morgan County, or this is a good fit for Davis County, or it's not for Morgan County. So they want to know if there's anybody that is, if the real estate that we may know of that they could utilize or help to help us in our economic development. So that's something that we can be thinking of. Okay, and then I'd like to go into closed session.
Okay. Commissioner McConnell.
Two airport-related items. Joe Garfield's been working with the state aeronautics folks about some grant funds. And we need to update our airport layout plan, master plan, so we're going to get a bid from Wasatch Civil to update, coordinate the various initiatives so that we have kind of a consolidated plan that will help us apply for those funds. There are some available for landscaping. We could do match even just with work. So that's, Joe's working on that. Once we get the estimate, we'll bring it back for approval depending on the amount. And then the Utah Highway Patrol would like to use the runway for a nighttime training facility or training exercise in cooperation with the Sheriff's Department. They need a section of closed asphalt where they can do a training exercise with respect to wrong-way drivers. I guess there's been a large number of them, incidents where people are going the wrong way and it helps them. I don't know what they're going to be doing. Maybe I'll watch.
They said they needed a commissioner to volunteer to be the
That's
wrong-way
right.
driver,
That's
right?
right. Otherwise known as a crash dummy.
Put that on. How is that going to affect your residents down there with noise and stuff going on at night?
Imagine it's a one-time.
Yeah, it's like a one-night thing.
Okay.
And it won't be any more noisy than the Blackhawks that come in at night to do training exercises. So
Do you have that too?
occasionally.
Wow. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner McConnell. Commissioner Wilson. Okay. Merry Christmas. Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. I just have a couple items. Josh, I think I'll see if I can find time to meet with you maybe this week sometime, but I just wanted to address a little bit of public comment about the geologic study and what our ordinance reads. And I think in Weber County, we help streamline that process, and I think I want to just at least talk to you about that and see if there's ways we can maybe help that process in the future or change that ordinance, better the ordinance, I guess, update it. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay, well, I'll find time to catch up with you on that. Had a meeting with our recreation director, and there's just a few highlights. I want to make sure that we're just kind of read publicly from the recreation department. Our director was able to get 2 certifications. One was youth sports professional, the other one was Department of Financial Sustainability. Our recreation department was nominated for Department of the Year through IRPA. I think that's Utah Recreation Parks Association. Our director was awarded a full ride scholarship for the Director's Summit. So recreation directors go to a summit, and this is back east. Do you remember where it's at? I think in Georgia. And initially, they awarded 50% of the fees for everything, and it was kind of expensive still, and we kind of pushed back a little, and they said, you know what, we're going to pay for the full amount. So that's a phenomenal thing. We were awarded the top participation for junior jazz in the state, Morgan County. 6% of the total population played basketball for junior jazz. So, yeah. Who knew?
Let's hope we get a real jazz player out of some of those. Huh?
A real jazz player did come visit us. We have the second largest football program in northern Utah. let's see, we also created
You're
a
welcome, school district.
Yes. We created a co-ed softball and women's basketball league this past year. And then the last one, the department was able to cut outside costs by $25,000 for the year 2024 for the upcoming year. So anyways, just some highlights from our recreation department that wanted to make sure I read publicly. And that's all I have.
That's wonderful. Appreciate the work that's going on. I think every department is doing what they can to use funding wisely and provide a good experience for our residents. Certainly appreciate that. So, okay. With that, we have a request to move into closed session for the purpose of discussing the professional character and professional competency of an individual and litigation. I'll look for a motion to move into that closed session. Josh, did you have one more item?
I just wanted to ask a question. Am I able to request certain individuals be available for the portion that I'm going to be talking about?
Yeah.
I'd like the Planning Commission Chair, Debbie Sessions, to stay for that portion.
Okay, perfect.
And Jeremy.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll look for an official motion, I guess, to move into closed hearing.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?